is up, y'all, and welcome to today's Theist Helpline. But the subjects have yet to come because we're about to get into it. Boop, boopa, shoopa, whoopa, 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 whoopa. And oh boy, I really do think I'm going to get not only music for this show, but update all the other shows. I need to get my producing butt in gear because I have not stopped thinking about this AP thing. I can't even get through the intros. Let's talk about the intro. This is Theist Helpline, where we are going to have conversations with theists and ask them what they believe and why. I do want to thank everyone for joining us on the inner tubes. Please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you can get reminders to join our live streams. I said it, YouTube. You can let them go now. Anyway, I don't know if that sounds like they're being held hostage from a war or they're being held hostage from like a Saw type of thing. I'll let you do the deciding. Anyway, we are about to head over to the fun in the sun with Taco and the rest and Randolph and everyone. I just want to give as quick of an intro as possible. Had a debate yesterday. I think it went pretty well. I had a good debate partner. Thank you so much again, Dr. Chris. Thank you, Ryan, for hosting us. Of course, James at Modern Day Debate for having us all there. And even my interlocutors, Glock and Fox. Was it Fox? Yes. They were cordial. I mean, we disagree. I think that I was talking to James off channel last night as we were closing shop that, you know, it's never the super religious people that are at the gender debates. They're more political, you know, entities, you know, as channels go, as people go. They don't really tend to talk about religion. They're more of a political focus. And yet I think religion, I swear, is actually the root of a lot of these gender-born issues. Sure, there are people that are going to sit there, as Glock said last night, and say that we're really just trying to have a debate on epistemology. You know, we're really just trying to understand language, or, you know, maybe the other route was we're really just not trying to upset the order that already works. But I think there's good reasons for why we've made such progress, why we view trans men as men, why we separate sex from gender. And I think it helps the LGBT community function in society, which I think is really isn't that what we all want? The true journey in life. All right, so go check that out. We had a good after show. I'm going to quickly talk about, I have to talk about it because I won't have time, but like, sending love out there. You're gay and sad. I'm so sorry. Sending love, April. But welcome, sending love to everybody. I still am baffled that that apostate prophet seemingly has converted to Christianity. I do not understand. I don't understand because I feel, and we're getting into feelings again, that he was someone who understood skeptic arguments. So if there was something that truly swayed him over to Christianity, I would love to know. I heard David Wood at the tail end of whatever one of their streams was, you know, going just all of this information. It shows Jesus didn't lie, and it all, you know, seems to add up. that man came back from the dead, walked on water. And he was talking about how you just have to come to these supernatural answers. But do you? Do you have to come to these supernatural answers? Or can we just wait if we don't know something? Because so far, the answer has never been supernatural. So far, the answer has always been we didn't know something, and then we learned the scientific basis. Maybe just talking back to a second ago, maybe we learned the social phenomena. And yet, we don't have any of that for a guy coming back from the dead. I sometimes tease them because they call their God a father. And I get all sorts of apologetics. It's actually fascinating how they differently defend God having to be a he, but also gender doesn't exist and it's tied to sex. And you go, all right, so he's got a XY? Well, does he have to have an XY? What is that? What is gender? They get very postmodern on us. The moment I just want to talk about, would God have to pay child support to marry? Luckily for God, they kind of skip over those years and go right to his 30s. Whew. You can tell this was written by a man. Anyway, I'm just teasing. I love everybody out there. Right. Focus. Fucus. There are many ways to support the show. We want to thank everyone out there for hanging around. Say hello. We'll say hello back. If you tag us, James isn't here, but send in love to my co-host James W. You can tag us, James W. and Amy Newman. But many ways to also support the show, like sending in super chats and joining our channel membership with our evolving badge system, where you get new badges that evolve into others over time. And it's not magic. I also like to think that the creationists believe in what I call Pokemon evolution. They really are waiting for like an animal to glow and then another animal just appears. Or for that same process to happen in birth, which would also be weird. But, whatever. Sending so much love to creationists. And everyone at patreon.com/Amy Newman helps us directly support the channel. Bunch of people like Azo reminding us we have a skeptic and ranting community. Come join us. Chris Disciple reminding us we have theists in the skeptic ranting community. You just got to be skeptical of your belief systems. Davegar reminding us that the earth is round and 4.5 billion years old. Only on the internet do you have to argue really the round one. But the 4.5 billion one, which a good chunk of this country of the United States, and we've exported it around the world, unfortunately, I think it's 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Just as crazy as a flat earth. Like, continuing forward, I could rant. We only have 2 minutes. Rachel Holen reminding us that you should not get slaves from the nations around you. Just go to a club, grab a femboy, or whatever you're into. Sending love to Regos, reminding us that we have a skeptic Bible study. It's going to be the summer soon. I want to really tackle the Bible. That's a good sentence to say. I always think the Bible creates more atheists. Especially if you read it page to page, chapter to chapter, and see all the horribleness. The Moses story made me cry, and not for, I think, the reason that the Jews and Christians were thinking. Anyway, sending love finally to even Ian Davenport. Saw him last night. Send love out there, reminding us that apologetic arguments aren't that great. But I guess we'll find out tonight as we head over there. As I'm getting ready, I see a whole bunch of amazing people. What is up, Amber? Thank you for coming on last night. Everyone should be checking out Ember and Mark Reid's channel, and they just had a stream last night as well. What's up, Robin? I saw your comments out there. Sending love back, and Dave Rogers and Shane Billowin. What's up? I have a TikTok, but I haven't done anything with it in like forever. I'm trying to remember even what my name is. I should add more things to it. The profile. Amy Newman TikTok. Oh, there you go. I'm trying to be original. So send love out there. And all right. We're going to head in. I'm going to press join stage and share screen. Also, let me close this window. Get a little bit of clutter away. Please tell me once we start that we have audio and things like that. And good. Waiting for the stage to start is good. I can always continue to keep yapping away. Yes, sending so much. 35 months. Woohoo! Shane Villowitz saying facts don't care about your feelings. And that seems to be personal experience, seems to be the number one and personal revelation, number one evidence given forward for why they believe a God exists. And yet that is not good evidence for a God. They try and give philosophy. Philosophy is, we can go over interesting syllogisms, go into different schools of thought, but at the end of the day, you eventually have to turn that hypothesis into a theory and go out and test it. Sending so much love, Ember. Thank you so much. I really do need to post on there. The 2 videos I posted were actually well received. I just got swamped. But I plan on possibly rearranging a bunch of things. I want to get more time. It's definitely the summer incoming. Do you even philosophy, bro? And we sometimes get flack for saying, like, why are you looking down on philosophy? I think that philosophy has a use. I think that it gave us a backbone, unlike theology, which really has given us, except for being part of history, if you want to understand history, hasn't given us a lot. Philosophy, all right, well, it helped us eventually not only learn how to think, but now it evolved into natural sciences that, actually gave us trains, planes, and medicine.
Hey, everybody.
Woo-hoo.
Good morning.
Hello. Hello.
Does mic sound okay?
Can someone say something?
Can someone say something?
Oh, perfect. Thank you, sir. My headset wasn't working, and I finally figured it out. So, perfect. It was just out of power.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, X? How are you, Taco and Shaken?
Feeling good. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
Going all right. We'll start a few minutes late. I can start it whenever now because the event's all jacked up. Real talk. So, yeah. I did invite Godless Engineer. He may or may not be joining us. I have no idea.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his. I watched his shit a long time ago.
Yeah. Isn't Godless Engineer quite knowledgeable about historicity stuff? I think I've watched him.
I think he's a mythicist.
Too. Yeah, but he's pretty well informed. Like, he's
Yeah, he's
way
good.
more informed than myself.
Ooh. Stupid dog toys.
I think he used to do great debates. I see him on talk shows now, but
Yeah, he did a debate with Wi-Fi Gospel on my channel.
oh, nice.
Yeah, that was fun, actually. It was a lot of fun.
That Hindu debate was a lot of fun.
That was a unique one.
I think the funniest thing about it was how different the religion is, and yet how it's somehow all boiled back down to the same arguments.
All right, so I can start this whenever. So let me.
Oh, why?
What's
What
up?
was the other person's religion?
It was Hinduism.
Were you saying someone who's not a Christian debated godless engineer?
Oh no, Godless has just done great debates. So I debated a Hindu, but then Godless just does great debates in general. I was trying to think of a specific one, but Taco just said that he did a debate on Taco's channel.
Cool.
I think he's better against historicity or for historicity.
So I think
whatever.
the thing that would be the most persuasive, not to be like culturalist or something, but like whenever someone's close to your culture, it's easier to relate and assume that they actually are familiar with and understand your perspective and that they're not disrespecting your culture. The Carvaka Hindu sort of school, or no, they're not Hindu properly, but the Carvaka, I mean, it's a school of philosophy within India, are the equivalent of the atomists of Greece from India. And they have very clear arguments that were made specifically about the Vedas and Hinduism. So you're not trying to draw from some like stuff that was made to combat Christianity, and then you're trying to just sort of repurpose the arguments for a religion which doesn't really resemble Christianity in most respects.
Yeah, it has some things which I said I liked about it. It's my joke. It's a non-profit religion. You know, they don't have a middleman, but they do have these gods that come down as avatars in human form.
Yeah. I grew up watching the Mahabharata and with a bit of a Vedic influence on the esoteric school that I was at from some members that brought that stuff. So I was like pretty familiar with some of it. And I grew up actually going to a Vedanta temple occasionally with my family. That was really, really, really beautiful. That did Vespers. So I had a lot of positive experiences with Hindu temples of various descriptions.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just like Christianity. It has like, you know, dozens of significantly different schools of thought that have totally different metaphysics and totally different versions of theisms that are not the same.
I'll tell you the one thing I found interesting, getting into some of the nitty gritty, you find that their creator God is the least worshipped God. It's like he has no following, and people are just like, yeah, that's the creator God, the one who made the universe. But we all follow these other gods.
Yeah.
One also got like the age of the world correct, or the age of the universe correct.
Pretty close to it. Yeah, they got the age of the Earth pretty close to correct, which is amazing.
Yeah,
just
better than
because
any
they took a big number, they multiplied it by another big number, and they ended up with the big number, which is way closer than anyone else got.
Hey, it's better than anyone else.
Well, if you're gonna give 6 to 10,000 years, yeah, I'll tell you, you're gonna be off by 99%.
Yeah. But yeah, the different metaphysics, according to Wikipedia at least, mostly stem from a disagreement about epistemology, right? So, like, even within Vedanta, there's like a more theistic Vedanta, and then there's a more like non-theistic kind of Vedanta, where they agree which parts of the Vedas have which level of authority in terms of being like correct or being metaphorical, and or literal or metaphorical. And so based on those decisions, their beliefs make sense given the sources that they find to be authoritative, basically. And I have a lot of respect for their schools of thought on that basis, that it's not just like, well, we had a schism and our king wanted to like divorce his wife, so we made a new religion. Like actually based on like huge debates about how the universe works, and they progressively change their views into many different schools of thought rather than having like a strict orthodoxy, like you said.
Generally nice around LGBTQ issues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not always, but generally.
And they have way better food, let's be honest. Like, if you've ever been to like a temple,
Well, if the
and-
choice is that bread that has no taste, whatever that wafer cracker is that Catholics give.
roti.
Yeah.
Oh no, the cracker's pretty bad. The blood of Christ cracker. Yeah.
Hopefully that wine is really good, but makes
I
up
never
for
got
it.
kicked out of the cat school for spitting it out because I didn't realize it was going to be that bad.
Oh. So it's not getting great Yelp reviews.
No.
People already got their
Thank
hands
you.
up.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Theist Helpline. We've got Amy Newman, Ix, the Shaken Fist. I'm not as good at intros as Randolph is. He's way better.
You're still good, Taco.
Yeah. He's the king of doing intros, right? But it's great to have everybody here. There's quite a few people in the audience today. It looks like we've got one person with their hand raised and a couple of maybe not anymore. But we'll be taking on theistic callers. Also looking for evidence of Bigfoot, their god monsters, ghosts, goblins. Am I missing anything, guys and gals?
Ghouls, ghasts, whatever. Ghosts.
Yeah, all that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, anything supernatural doesn't exist, so come on down.
Well, it wouldn't be supernatural otherwise.
Yeah, but we'd love to see evidence for it. This is a call-in show, so raise your hand so that you can get pulled up to the call-in show, and we'll pull you up on the panel. We'll try not to dogpile you.
Oh my. But welcome, Mystifier.
You.
Hello.
How are you? What do you believe and why?
I believe in Christ, and the reason is because a lot of reasons, but mostly just kind of like scriptural. I understand a lot of people who don't believe in Christ or anything supernatural. They say it doesn't like line up with science. I can understand that because I used to be an atheist. I understand that perfectly. And in fact, I was like that, and it's like reading the Bible. Some things didn't line up, and I was disappointed in that. And then you really like research. You go into deep like etymology of the Bible and like the history and the wars and whatever, and you realize everything lines up. Like there's nothing that really doesn't line up unless it's like based on language differences. And in that, the best evidence we have with like, there's Greek and Hebrew, like what is it called? Like text in Greek and Hebrew, like they don't line up or whatever, yada yada yada. I understand that. But most people who hate the Bible, they'll stop right there. Like they'll look at like places like Numbers 31 or Deuteronomy 21 verse like I forget. But basically they'll be like, oh yeah, the Bible condones rape. And then they don't look at like the context in like Levitical times, let's say. They don't look at the context of the world at that time. And they look at it from like modern day perspectives, like, oh, slavery is wrong. Like, we got to understand something. Slavery was only found wrong, number one, in the West, number two, in the past about 200 years.
Could I pause you for a second?
Go ahead.
Because I would say the reason why we criticize slavery so hard is because the interpretation that has to work would be, listen, they're just humans of the time. They could only know so much because they didn't have an omnipotent being, and so they got these issues seemingly wrong. And so why wouldn't an omnipotent God know to put slavery, don't own slaves thousands of years ago, because that would stand the test of time?
The reason is because we as humans who have our, Gnostic theorems, I believe that there are many things in the past, like, that we've improved upon, but we see ourselves as...
Not Gnostics here. I mean Gnostic theorems.
I'm talking about, like, general Gnosticism. I'm not talking about, like, Gnosticism in differentiation with, like, true Christianity. I'm talking about, Gnosis is like, knowledge. So what I'm talking about is, like, people who see themselves... That's fine. It's Gnosticism. It's those who tout themselves as knowledgeable.
But
So the concept is...
why didn't God know slavery was wrong? Why isn't that like the first?
Well, I'm trying to explain that.
Okay.
So I have a contention with that. I used to think slavery was wrong because I was associating it with, like, modern... Well, you're laughing at me, but if you let me continue to talk, you'll understand why. So the concept is, slavery is wrong, but not the kind of slavery that the Bible talks about. The kind of slavery the Bible talks about is basically, like, you can get your fellow Israelite, right, to be your slave if they owe you something, right? If they, I don't know, stole something of yours or XYZ, whatever. That I find pretty reasonable. Indentured servitude to pay off crime, that's absolutely wonderful. I think that's, like, that does a lot more.
Are you talking about the kind of slavery that says that you can go and take prisoners from neighboring countries and you own their children's children in perpetuity? Because the type you're talking about is a completely different type, and you should know well from actually reading the Bible, which you say you do, that talks about multiple types. Now, I assume that if you have a strong opinion on this, that you've read Josh Bowen's Slavery in the Old Testament book, have you not?
I have not read that. Okay,
so here's the book for you to go read, since this matters a lot to you and you've thought about it and you probably want to get more information on it. So Joshua Bowen is a scholar of antiquities, and specifically, he reads in the original, like, Akkadian and Sumerian and stuff, the actual text other than just the Hebrew and the Aramaic, right? So you can hear from him not just how it sounds in the context of the Jewish tradition, how it sounds in the context of all the Near Eastern law codes that are comparable to it, that precede it, and that probably influenced it, right? Because it lines up with a bunch of other countries in the neighboring area that just kind of did the same stuff. And in respects where it's significantly different, it's much more similar to stuff from the Athenian law code by Plato, for instance. So there's significant evidence that it's actually a much later compilation, and that a lot of the law code stuff in the Old Testament actually originates from around, like, 300 BC, because it's indebted to Plato and the Laws of Athens book.
Wait, a lot of the law code, what? What is the word you're using?
The Laws of Athens. So
the Laws of Athens.
Plato wrote a number of books which show strong mimesis or imitation of specific details that are around the time of Plato writing it, which is shortly before the compilation of the Septuagint, which was the Greek version. And we don't have earlier Hebrew versions of many of these things, right? So what we have to conclude is that not only did a lot of these so-called God-given things actually originate from just, like, neighboring countries and influences, but that some of them are very late and indicate that the version of the Old Testament that we know from the most complete form, which is the Septuagint and onwards, there are fragments of many of the other books, right? Like the Nag Hammadi library and Dead Sea Scrolls fragments show us early versions of lots of things, but we don't really have a complete set of all the stuff in Deuteronomy and the law codes, for instance, anywhere else with the Septuagint. And it may be that it originated only shortly before the Septuagint was compiled from, like I said, drawing inspiration from Hellenic sources, because early Jews were deeply enmeshed in a Hellenic world where they lived amongst Hellenistic culture.
That could be true. And the reason why I rebuttal that, I don't believe that, because the like I did have those thoughts as you did, like, I mean, numerous times. However,
You kind of
when you research historical data, going back to like, scrolls and whatever and parchments, that's good and all. But you have to go. Sorry, what's up?
They only go back. Your scrolls that you're talking about only go back to the 2nd century BC.
I understand that. So the concept is when we have historical artifacts, we can't say the earliest, like we could, right? For rough etching, we can say the earliest thing we have is X, but something came before it that was Y. And because Y came before X, Y must be, what X was influenced by. However, now, I'm going, for devil's advocate and for Christianity. You can't do with either one. I can't say like, oh, Christianity came before Zoroastrianism, even though it didn't. But it's like they say Zoroastrianism came before Christianity, and I can't say, well, that influenced Christianity because technically, based on Scripture, we can understand that Zoroastrianism came long after Adam and Eve. Now, you could say, oh, you're basing your history on fairy tales, but the Muslims base their claim that Jesus is X and corrupt and whatever. They say Islam came way before, Christ and Moses. So it's like, you gotta understand, tearing with the whole like, oh, I found this artifact before another doesn't really work because there's obviously going to be artifacts before that. You just haven't
know the
found.
phrase "gratis negator."
I don't
In
know
other
what that
words,
is.
Okay, it's Latin for basically like freely dismissed, right? If you say something with no evidence, then it carries little to no weight as an argument. So if someone has strong evidence that there's like no occurrences of something prior to a certain date, and then something else occurs at a certain date, and then immediately afterwards there's an occurrence of it imitating that thing after that date.
But what if the thing that came before the thing that was written was influenced by the thing before it? That was the same thing as the one after it.
Oh, you mean Mesopotamia?
You don't have that thing, so you don't have the evidence. You're just saying you imagine someone might find evidence someday, but we do have evidence to the contrary. So, for instance,
no, I didn't say we might find evidence.
If the archaeological record shows that like dinosaurs existed prior to 6000 BC, and someone says, yeah, but you just haven't found the 5,000-year-old dinosaur bones, which are surely there, we just haven't found them because the devil hid them or something, right? Their argument is freely dismissed because it carries zero evidence or weight. Now, it doesn't mean that it's impossible, right? It's so unlikely, given all the evidence to the contrary, that it just is dismissible. But it's not just an evidence of absence, right? We're saying that there's a preponderance of contrary evidence that makes it so unlikely that this absent evidence is ever going to turn up that no one is even looking for it anymore. It is considered impossible to the extent that possibility suggests that it's worth looking for.
The dinosaur thing, like you just brought up that point, and that's a really good point. The whole like, humans and dinosaurs didn't exist alongside each other, but like people like, David mentions them and whatever, and it's like, I think he mentions like the behemoth, whatever, and that's basically like that dinosaur with like the spiky ball tail or whatever the heck. That's what I assume David is talking about. I think it was David. But anyhow, I don't believe that dinosaurs came like millions of years ago. I don't think the Earth is millions of years old. And I think that we're only like telling people that because they were geologists in the 1800s. Now, I don't know if you know this, but geology is a pretty new science compared to like the rest of science. Like even chemistry is pretty old, surprisingly. Like when I see studies of like
so and so again for a second, because I believe the only reason that you're challenging the age of the Earth is because of religion. And so if we were to tackle these religious issues...
I started questioning the age of the Earth before I came to Christ when I was an atheist.
Sure,
what led me to Christ is that none of science was checking out.
I'll accept that. However, I'm either skeptical or I would say that might have led you to theism, your skepticism of things like mainstream science, well known. So things like, if you think the world, for example, I'm not saying you do, but if you think the world is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, for example, you're off by 99%. So that is something that is a problem to have such a high amount of empirical evidence for billions of years, because we know the universe is billions of years older than that. 4.5 billion years old isn't that old. And so once we
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Empirical evidence is built off of like a series of occurrences that happen one after another. The data that is used to extrapolate these empirical, data points, they build off of one another. So there's a man, and he says in the 1800s, he says the Earth is this many years old. There's another man in Timbuktu, and he says, yeah, the Earth is maybe 3 billion years old. And so what happens is humanity has to come to a consensus, right? Now, every single study after that, after the consensus was reached...
pause you? We already know empirically from things. We have carbon dating for things that are alive in a certain band. We have all sorts of dating methods. We know how long it takes for certain elements and stars to form. We have pictures of how old the universe is from things like the Big Bang. All of these are from methodologies that are peer review. These are people trying to prove each other wrong. And can I ask you, how old do you think the age of the Earth is?
I don't know exactly, but I do know one thing's for sure. It's definitely not millions of billions of years old, because that doesn't make sense.
But that means you're off by 99%. That means
according
to science.
Oh my gosh. Listen, you have to understand something. In order to read the Bible, in order to really get into any religion, and there's only one true religion, at least in the modern day.
That's what they all say.
I mean, Marduk was before any of them. Gilgamesh has Jesus imagery, and that comes from well before even like the origins of like Judaism. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they came before you, so they were correct. Whatever.
All right. Well, only one checks out prophetically. No other people have prophecies that have lined up with.
Aren't even about Jesus. You just make them about Jesus.
No. They're very specifically about Jesus. If you use the wrong translation.
Emmanuel and the Virgin, and then 2 lines later where it says it's about the coming of the king of Assyria.
Where is this?
It's I don't have the things to mind. It's
do give me the verse and I'll check it out, but I don't think I'm prepared to debate about that because I haven't researched it.
Well, I want to ask you some quotes about the Bible, just very specifically to go back, because
of course
a few things, and I know this is 2 subjects, but one, he did not solve Jewish prophecy. He wasn't the Jewish Messiah. Jewish Messiah was to reconquer Jerusalem. It wasn't to resurrect from the dead. Resurrecting from the dead wasn't a Jewish prophecy. In fact, the Jews viewed this as a weakness. They viewed this as just some other cult taking off.
I want you to read Daniel 9, verses 24 through 27.
Is this the ones where they're trying to say that he said, I am that I am?
No. I want you to read 2 things. One is part of the Bible, the other is part of the Talmud. The Talmud confirms Jesus. Okay? It's an evil book. It's not a demonic book. Everyone can read it. It's fine. But it's not a very good book for faith. So in the Talmud, in the Babylonian Talmud, don't tell me it's not true, because I mean the Talmud was made by my people. Okay, so here's the deal.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Daniel
It's midrash opinions.
As an ex-Jew, I can tell you the Talmud is just a bunch of rabbis arguing. It doesn't prove anything.
So you obviously don't know how the Talmud works. That's Gemara. So Gemara is the latter portion of the Talmud. The first part is the Mishnah. Now the Mishnah is about the laws, and it also has a little bit of history in it. Now, the laws have
it helps prove that Jesus was the Messiah?
So let me continue, please. Okay. So there are laws in the Mishnah that had to be, you go through the Torah and they say there are, things that don't line up, whatever. And also, their sacrifices stopped working in around like 40 years before the destruction of the temple, when Jesus entered Jerusalem, when he was about 30 years old. So basically,
they weren't looking for a sacrifice. That was not part of being a Messiah. I don't know why you're talking about sacrifices. They were looking for someone to be a conqueror.
If you would let me speak.
I was letting you speak, but you
cut me off when I get to crux. Listen, please listen.
I cut you off when you started drifting. Please.
I did not drift. Let me get to the point. There's a Babylonian Talmudic tractate. It's called Yoma 39b. I want you to read it and tell me Christ isn't Lord. Even my people, the Jews, okay? The Pharishees.
They're not your people. Jews are a different religion. You're a Christian.
So Christians are Jews. They're spiritual Jews. If you look at Romans 11, Christians are...
Muslims are Christians?
Okay, so, oh my gosh. Listen, please read... please read Yoma 39b. I want everyone here to read Yoma 39b. It was written by the Pharisees who rejected Jesus.
Isaiah 7:13 to 17, and then tell me how it's about Jesus then.
I did not say it was about Jesus. I'm telling you, read Yoma 39b
Rabbi
of the
Bar
Babylonian
Bar
Talmud.
Sheila said, what is the verse that indicates that a husband is a robber? The verse states, oh my God, rescue me out of the hand of the wicked, out of the hand of the righteous. Where is Jesus?
So, here, I'll read it, since you guys aren't really reading things
I'm
for
reading
the ends
Yoma
of constructive.
39b. Call.
So, to the ends of constructive conversation, right, we have to be integrous, and we have to read something without mocking it for one sentence. I'm going to read the entire thing, okay? All right. It's not written by the early Christians. It's written by my people, the Jews, who rejected
You're
Jesus.
not a Jew. You're a Christian, but focus reading.
Okay, so I am a Kohanim Levite on both sides. My mother and father are both Kohanim from the tribe of Levi. So yes, I'm very much a Jew. I'm not a Gentile, I'm a Jew.
Okay, you're a
Anyhow.
Christian. You are no longer a Jew. You converted to a different religion.
So
That's
you
not
obviously
legal.
haven't read the New Testament. Romans 11 does not say that I am a Christian. They were first called Christians in Antioch, Acts 11:26. We are Christians to differentiate ourselves from the
Okay,
new
do you
Jews.
believe the
who are
Messiah
people who
has
keep-
came? Do you believe the Messiah has came?
Can I explain? Okay.
Do you believe the Messiah has
No,
came? Yes or
listen.
no?
Listen. Okay. The Christians are not Jews in the sense that they are not the Jews of today, but they are sealed into the Israelite promise. No one can be saved unless you are an Israelite. You are sealed into the branch of Abraham. Romans 11. I want you to read Romans 11. Every Christian, atheist, Muslim in here, you read
We're on
Romans
Yoma
11.
B.
So Romans 11 for that rebuttal, and then I'm going to read the tractate here, and it's extremely important. And I want to be clear: it is not written by Christians or Muslims or this or that. It is written by the Jews back in that day. I'm gonna look it up because I think I'm gonna rebuke myself because I don't think I'm speaking the truth here. When was Yoma 39b Babylonian?
And after we do this Yoma thing, I want to go
Talmud.
back to Leviticus because
Written.
remember, Jewish slavery is horrible, shouldn't be endorsed.
I understand, so we can go back to that, but just because if I go on a tangent, it's probably because it's more important than anything else.
Well,
This
you
is
said
one of
you
the
were
most
going to
important
start
parts.
reading, and then you didn't. After you cut
Well,
us
because
off
I need to
from, we
so-
were reading. We were reading straight from Yoma.
No. You
39b.
read one sentence and said, "How does this have to do with Jesus?" First, I need to check the validity of the tractate. I want to see when it was
So
written.
taciturn,
Okay.
with respect,
is-
we're going to stop the tangent because although it might, we could follow everything if we didn't have other people that want to talk. And
These tangents are very important for people's salvation. You have to understand,
We're not
Jesus is
teaching.
Lord, and I will prove it.
You got to understand this is not a pulpit. Okay, so you're talking to us, not to the people that you want to hear you. This isn't your pulpit.
We can't have
So
the
what we're gonna
audience
do
come
is
to
we're going to
Christ
just
through.
return. We're going to
proof.
return to the subject at hand, which is why do you believe in God, not just like going after whatever you want.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to prove why I believe in God. I was a staunch atheist. I was extremely science minded, and then I realized, wait a minute. 1 Corinthians 3. It says I think it's the wisdom of man is made X, Y, Z. Just read 1 Corinthians 3. I mean, I can read it if you like.
I mean, I'd like to read Isaiah.
Keeps
7,
on
but I
saying,
asked
just go
about
read
before
it. I don't know
Paul.
what it says.
Sure, Isaiah 7. Let's read it. Because I don't really.
Point to Isaiah 7 being
before we
Jesus
get off on
but a virgin.
before we get off on the.
Listen, excuse me. There are no tangents. Yes, there's a lot of things to talk about, but this whole tangent thing is kind of odd. I will talk about slavery, but first I want to go to Isaiah 7. I'll humor the shaken. That's pretty awesome.
New quote.
Let's see.
Go read this quote. Go read this quote. Go read this quote. I don't know what they say, but go read them.
I want to ask one simple question before we go into Bible verses.
What do you mean? I don't know what they say. Of course, I know what they say. I haven't memorized every word in the Bible, but I know what 1 Corinthians is. 1 Corinthians 3
you don't
is what led me to Christ.
The portion in Yoma 39b that proves that the Jews.
Yeah, it's talking. So it's talking about a crimson thread that was tied around. If I'm not mistaken, it was tied onto a goat, and it was led out into the wilderness. And they would know that their sacrifice was the sacrifice is accepted if the thread turned white. Now, the difficulty with that is that after starting around 30 AD and afterwards until the destruction of the Second Temple, so that thread stayed crimson, and it's basically still stayed crimson till this day. I mean, they won't do sacrifices, but it would still be crimson. Why? because God won't accept a sacrifice besides Jesus Christ. You have to understand that.
Or
Even in the Talmud,
sacrificial
it confirms.
logic is evil. There is no Son of God except for
So
lay
your
sons of
your
God.
fallacious preconceived notions are hindering
Like
you from the truth.
Moses, they called Moses the son of a god. Things like this, but they never believed in a sacrifice for the Messiah, for Jerusalem, for Israel.
Okay, so let's see. Psalm 22 is another really good chapter because verse 6 has a beautiful poetic word. It is tolaat, which is crimson worm. This is, I saw it on Instagram and I was like, yo, this is crazy. This just confirms the Messiah. Have you read Psalm 22?
I'm looking at it right now. My God, why have you forsaken me? What about this? Help me get
Just
there.
listen. Just do me a favor, okay? And I'm doing this for your benefit, for my benefit, and for the benefit of the man in the moon. When you read something that I'm offering you, read it with a little bit more chutzpah. You know, like read it like you're reading something that you don't absolutely despise with all your soul. You know what I mean? Or I can read it, but the way you're reading it, you read one sentence and you're like, yeah, I don't want. So you see what? So if you would like me to read it, I can, because I can actually break down what's going on here, and I can actually break down the
So in
etymology.
the amount of time you have just tried complaining, just read it. Read what you think proves your point, please.
Okay, so it says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me, and from the words of my roaring? O my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest not, and in the night season, and am not silent. But thou art holy, O thou that inhabitest the praises of Israel. Our fathers trusted in thee, they trusted, and thou didst deliver them. They cried unto thee, and were delivered. They trusted in thee, and were not confounded. But I am a worm. Now the worm is tolaat, which is crimson worm. The life cycle of the crimson worm. Let's get AI overview real quick because I'm not going to an entire biological dissertation here. Crimson worm life cycle. Crimson worm life cycle.
Why
No,
are you
it's
looking up the worm life cycle?
Because it's
Just
relevant.
numerology. Let's go.
It's a Dune reference, okay? Let's give him credit for a nice.
Listen. You guys are like flacking me for going into deep. Like as atheists, you should understand. You should like commend me for going into the etymology of things, because otherwise you could just say, oh, you just believe in Christ for no reason. No, I believe in Christ because it is deeply truthful in every language. If you translate it, if you go to the first translation, it is pure, beautiful poetry that points to the Messiah.
Question. When you first started talking, I wanted to ask this question, but I waited for a bit, and it's really important to clear it up. When you claim that the Bible, quote, lines up, and you keep saying lines up, lines up, lines up, and now you're clarifying it seems further. You're saying it is completely truthful. Okay. Now, do you believe that the Old Testament is historically accurate?
Yes, I do, 100%.
Okay. So given that you also believe that the world is 6,000 years old and that you're very skeptical of anything like science or geology, sounds like it's because you dismiss the evidence of the academic scientific research of the Bible and you're drawing from some alternative evidence or way of interpreting it. You do not agree with like the consensus of almost all scholarship that like major events in the Old Testament are not historical.
I understand. So the reason why I reject the scholarly consensus is because I explored it for years. For years before I came to Christ, I was an atheist and I was obsessed with science. I was like, I'm gonna discover the mystery of the world, you know. I was especially obsessed with geology, which is fortunate because I realized that the entire science it's wonderful. You know, we've figured out a lot of things, whatever.
We've never
it's beautiful.
heard this before.
But the fealty we hold to the scientific institutions, it's really honestly a religion at this point. Like there are certain fields like neurology, neuroendocrinology, psychology, psychiatry, quantum physics, things like or theoretical physics. All of these things, they check out. It's kind of like Andrew Tate. 3% of what Andrew Tate says is cool. The rest is like, whoa, hold up there, bucko. So that's how I feel about a lot of the obscure esoteric sciences, where it's like, oh, you don't understand the mathematics behind it. I mean, one example, if you look at the Navier-Stokes equations, those are not like it's a mystery of the mathematical world. You can't make an unconstrained Navier-Stokes equation. Like Navier-Stokes derivatives, because it's like, what is the word called when it's like against logic? Like it's like a catch-22 where it's like you basically can't unconstrain it because the whole concept of calculating it is to constrain it. It's like calculating a Brownian motion
What is he talking about
occurrence.
now?
You can't. The whole
A lot
concept
of
of
things are
Brownian motion.
approximations, and they're numerical solutions.
No.
like
You
cheap
can never
numerical
approximate
calculations,
what can't be constrained,
approximations
because
are
once you constrain
sufficiently
it, it's
accurate.
no longer. I understand,
we
but you're
don't-
approximating
we
what's
don't-
been constrained.
Look, let's put it this way. You claim that you did a lot of reading about geology and science. But
Yeah, for
you
about
are
5 years.
You're currently so skeptical that you just conclude that the world is 6,000 years old and think everything in the Bible is historically accurate. If I give you a reading list of 3 YouTube channels, all of whom have books and authors and experts, for you to go and look into this, will you do that and come back to us next time and tell us what you learned?
Say that very last part again.
I have 3 recommendations for you. Number 1, on the subject of slavery, just it's a minor issue compared to whether science is real and the world is 6,000 years old. But since slavery is something we brought up, Joshua Bowen,
Yes.
I posted a YouTube video from him in the chat. I will post 2 more videos in a few minutes, and I'll DM them to you as well if you accept.
I might look at that, except I didn't come to my slavery opinion because of like a video I watched saying this is why slavery is cool, or even the Bible. I actually abhorred slavery, and I was like, whoa, why is the Bible, like, why is my Lord condoning this? That's disgusting. And then I could go to the rationality and say, like the rationalization, and say like, oh, you know, it wasn't the perfect law, but then again, shouldn't the Lord abhor it? Right? Why would the Lord
I'm not
allow that
trying
and encourage
any
it?
conclusions about your reasons or what you might conclude if you look at these things. I'm assuming you have an open mind, and it just has been led in this direction by the facts and sources that you've been reading. What I'm suggesting is step 1, and actually I wouldn't read Josh Bowen first, but maybe that might open your
Could you
mind
give me
more.
like a summary of the book? Because I really don't like reading anything but articles.
I don't
I'm
really
going
like
to send
reading
you
it.
some summaries, like
Oh,
videos.
yeah,
that
Nobody
you
really
don't-
like. I'm going to be honest. Nobody actually likes reading. It's a complete like everyone is like, oh, I love
What?
reading. Like it just doesn't exist.
I just bought
Before-
the new Murderbot series.
Yeah, I know it's
I'm gonna
fiction.
send
I'm
you
talking about
videos, what I
nonfiction. I
always
like
do-
reading nonfiction, but only in small spurts.
To be clear, what I always do is I first send people in interviews. They can hear like 2 people talking. For the same reason Plato and many other writers use dialogues, 2 people talking. It's the reason the Bible imitates that pattern, right? Now, secondly, after reading Joshua Bowen, or in whatever order, whatever like skimming you want to do, so peruse Joshua Bowen's work, Slavery in the Old Testament. It's in its 2nd edition. The audiobook is really good. Just watch as much of that as you need to. Step 2, you need to familiarize yourself with a channel called Myth Vision. It's hosted by Derek Lambert. It has literally the top 20 biblical scholars, archaeologists, and like classicists who are all familiar with the context in which all of these texts sit. And you'll get a much more diversified understanding of the scholarly perspectives on this, why they hold those views. It's going to be harder for you to dismiss than whatever you've probably read before. And thirdly, I would strongly, since you believe in the 6,000-year-old stuff, recommend Aaron Ra's Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism series. But Aaron Ra specialized in this. He debates people on this stuff like on a daily basis. And there are many people like him who just deal with this one issue because it's so terrifying that people still think the world is 6,000 years old. So
I think
those
it's
three-
terrifying that people trust. Like, do you believe in the Big Bang?
It's underdetermined. It's fine if the Big Bang is false, right? We have a lot of different cosmologies, and
So,
things that far
so
back
the question remains:
be wrong.
who created the universe? If the Big Bang is false, because when I was a kid, I'm still a kid, but like the concept is like when I was like 6, 8 years old, you hear about the Big Bang, and you just sit there and ponder like, if the Big Bang happened.
Dismissed everything that you said.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm going on one
Cosmologies-
branch.
Is this a
It's underdetermined.
whataboutism?
No, it's not a whataboutism. It's me speaking. So basically, if the Big Bang does exist, then someone still created the Big Bang, and if the Big Bang doesn't exist, then someone still created the universe.
So
The
there are
universe. There's always a
emerging,
Genesis point.
Can I
there are
just
emerging
ask?
cosmological.
Can I ask Mr. Fire? I'm sorry, I feel like he's gonna reject those 3 channels. You should check out. First of all, not only is Josh hot, but he is amazing, intelligent. You go check out Myth Vision. But I want to tie it back to your slavery. I look at the Bible like you just explained science. I think there's 3% good. That's we could probably mine for a little bit more, but generally speaking, it is either stuff we would have known or stuff that is horrific, like in the Old Testament. So to bring it back,
Deuteronomy 21:10.
Oh yeah, I can actually explain that. I was explaining that to I think it was Muslims the other day, because they were saying that pedophilia is wrong, and I said, yeah, pedophilia is wrong, and that the Bible doesn't condone that. And then they rebutted me with a pairing of Numbers 31 and Deuteronomy 21. And the silly thing is, not only did I prove them wrong, by proving them wrong, I mean, I was put on mute and I just spoke to myself so I could actually like memorize what these things were. They, when they unmuted me, I said, listen, there are hadiths that specifically say Aisha was, XYZ at 9 years old. Their rebuttal to me consisted of, yeah, because she was intelligent and mature for her age. So yeah, you can estimate how many giggles came out of my throat that time.
So what? I'm talking about female captives that are taken in war in the Old Testament.
Oh yes, very easily. I'm gonna bring up the passage, the chapter first of all, because I want to have it up.
The Lord your God hands them over to you, and you take them captive. Suppose you see among the captives.
I understand. Let me explain it. I understand.
And so
I got it. I understand. I understand. We both know the verse. We both know the verse. Let me explain it. I got you.
Her father and mother.
Yeah, I got you. So right, I got you. So I got you. So I got you. So at this point, you're just so I got you. So okay. So yeah. Okay. So got it. We both know what was in the passage. Everyone else does if they look up Deuteronomy 21. Where is it? I think it starts at 7. No, it's not starting at 17. Wait a minute.
I can read
it starts at verse it starts. Where does it start?
21:10.
Yes, it starts at 21:10. Yeah, that's good. So everyone read Deuteronomy 21:10 until basic. No, I'm not talking about you. I'm saying everyone, because you just kind of like steamrolled me in order to make fun of me. Like I know you weren't doing it to like spread knowledge. You were kind of doing it to just overpower me. When I said I can try to explain it. So anyhow, the concept of capturing the prisoners of war, which are women, right, not men. You're not going to capture men because you're going to kill the men, right? If you go to the Midianites or the Hittites or the Amalekites, when you're defeating, or the Edomites, when you go to these people and you're going to kill them, right? Number one, you're killing all the men. They're going to be in battle, and also the ones that aren't in battle, you still kill them. All the men, you kill them all. Not only that, you kill, basically the men. I don't know how it works. Anyhow, so there are women left, right? Those are prisoners of war. So you take them in unto your own people, and whoever you find to be, I don't know, captivating, right? You may captivate into your own domicile and, do the spelunky bunky. However, a lot of people say, hey, that's rape. Now, I say it's not rape. Why? Because you have to look at the context. I'm not specifically saying that it's not rape. It is a possibility.
Hey, let's use a little easier, softer word.
Also, I just have to apologize.
I said spunky belunky. I said spunky belunky. I think that's a pretty soft word.
This is the problem. This is why so many of us are anti-theist, is it makes people defend passages that allow people
I'm not defending. No, I'm not defending it. If you let me continue instead of telling me this is why let me continue.
Don't get passive aggressive.
I'm not getting passive aggressive. You're cutting me off before I make my point. Listen. Okay.
You actually cut her off in that sentence.
Please. Let me explain. Okay. The context is Levitical times. This is approximate. I'm going to look up when was the time period of Moses. Okay. Moses born what year?
Moses didn't
exist.
It doesn't matter.
God's rule is forever, right?
So I'm gonna let you know something. As a Kohanim Levi, a person named Moses has to have existed for me to be breathing oxygen today. I come from the tribe of Levi.
That's not true.
Therefore, Aaron has to have existed along with Moses.
Mystifier, this is great. You're going to learn where oxygen comes from today. So there's actually photosynthetic bacteria. These photosynthetic bacteria, they make energy from sunlight and poop out oxygen. What happened is they evolved. There's multicellular versions of this, which we call plants. And because the earth became green from the domination of these plants, it now gives you this fantastic oxygen.
So you're trying to refute Moses with oxygen. Number one, macroevolution doesn't exist. It doesn't make sense mathematically. It literally can't computate.
I would love to see the mathematics you have for that, but you were just trying to say, excuse me, were you trying to say that you can't breathe because of Moses? That's your scientific argument?
No. You misconstrued what I was trying to communicate.
By all
so
means.
no. So yes, of course, by all means. You deliberately misconstrued what I said in order to make fun of me. Listen,
After you say by all
Moses-
means, you generally follow up by explaining what you mean. Go.
So Moses was born, and then Aaron was his brother,
Heck,
and then
yes, it
Aaron had
is.
kids, and then
But
of
welcome,
those children
Dionysus.
all the way down, right, appears me, because my mother and father are from the lineage of the Levites, specifically the priestly Levites, the Kohanim. Okay? So when you say Moses never existed, I'm not offended. I'm not like, no, you're refuting my Bible. No, I'm like, someone put me in a coffin already, or just snap your fingers like Thanos, because I never existed if Moses never existed. A lot of people treat the Bible like it's some sort of fairy tale myth. I'm
Mr.
sorry, but you're
Fire?
denying most of history when you completely erase the Bible.
But wait, can I let you in on a secret? You're not the descendant of Moses. Moses was not a real person. It is a fairy tale, a fable, something that the Jews passed around that they didn't even like to codify into written words until their temple fell.
I mean, it was probably the Hyksos leaving Egypt anyway, not Moses. Considering the only proof of any Levantine exodus we have of Levantine peoples leaving Egypt was the exit of the Hyksos after they were defeated by Amun-Hotep's father. Bollocks, I've forgotten.
Yeah. Wait, what about the stele? What about the stele? Like in between?
The first mention of the Israelites. So it's probably that the Hyksos merged with a group of people called the Epiru, which were a group of nomadic peoples that after the Bronze Age collapsed, where the sea peoples came in from the Aegean Sea and collapsed the entire Levantine and Mesopotamian area.
Okay, but why did they mention Israel in the Grand Stele? There's a vertical stele from an Egyptian pharaoh that mentions the Israelite people.
Yeah, and it's after that. The Stele of Merneptah is from around 1207 BCE.
Yeah, Israel became part of the Egyptian kingdom, right? So, like, here's the problem. You assume that because there's mention of historical names and things in the Bible that it must be true, and you haven't actually investigated the archaeology or the history of it.
Well, I just mentioned a stele. Like, I literally just mentioned an archaeological artifact, and you're like, oh, you just trust the Bible.
He just told you that it's late. You understand? It's not evidence of the Exodus. So
do you know how many years after Exodus it was?
After the expulsion of the Hyksos, it was about 300 years. Yeah. The expulsion of the Hyksos was around 1500 to 1500 BCE.
Give me a second. I'm going to look at this
documentary film based on the work.
First intermediary period.
There's a documentary film called The Bible Unearthed. It's based on the work of Finkelstein et al., and it is one of the most authoritative and still to this day influential works on the subject of the history of the Exodus and of the conquest. If you haven't even familiarized yourself with this stuff, like, you're just cherry picking sources that led you down a garden path.
Okay, so it's only 200 years after the Merneptah whatever stele is only 200 years after Moses.
Yes. No. So it's important for you to familiarize yourself with the issues with the historicity of the Exodus and of the conquest, because they're considered completely ahistoric at this point by the vast majority of scholarship. And the only scholarship that still thinks that they're real are the faith-based institution ones who literally work for a place where they would be fired for heresy if they said otherwise.
I see.
I mean, the Bible on Earth was written by 2 Jews as well.
Yes, that's because Christians are Jews. The first Christians were all Jews. Every single last one of them was a Jew.
Work in Israel. They're from the Jerusalem University. You know, they were the Jews. They're not Christians.
Yeah, it's not even necessary.
Wait, what? I thought you were talking about the people who wrote the New Testament.
And Israel Finkelstein is the names.
Yeah.
I'm confused. You're saying that I'm talking about most of the New Testament writers were Jewish. There were only a couple of them that were Gentile. Sorry, there was only like one of them that was Gentile. Wasn't it like Luke or whatever? Was Luke Gentile?
The problem,
a bit of a tangent. We're talking about the historicity of the Bible. So the historicity of the Bible is the question, right? Because if you believe everything, it's because you believe at the very start it's truthful from beginning to end, right? So
The
if you
reason is
can-
because I've looked into everything I thought was untruthful, and I'm like, whoa, hold up, it lines up. Never mind.
and I am going to point out lots of sources that you have not read. And
All right.
the channel that I pointed out, MythVision, has 20 plus of the absolute best scholars on biblical history, archaeology, etc. You can start with Finkelstein and the Bible Unearthed. That's a really good entry point for just the core issue of the Exodus. And I'll give you the kind of evidence that they have. It's not just the absence of evidence kind of evidence. It's the preponderance of contradictory evidence kind of evidence. So something you may not know, and I can send you screenshots from the book. I can send you the PDF or the EPUB if you want to actually read it. All the stuff they talk about in this documentary is in the book in more detail with data, facts, figures, maps. What they show on the computer screens in there is printed in the book. The settlements of ancient Israel have been excavated, specifically in Judea. When they tried to dig in any of the places that it said that there was a Jewish city or settlement that was very old, they didn't find anything. When they did a grid search of the entire region with no bias over what they would find, the grid search is how they found the actual settlements of the Judean highlands. What they actually found is a graph of the number of hearths, the age of the hearths, the number and size of every building, the types of tools and equipment that they had. They were able to estimate the population over about a 5,000 year period. And what they're able to do from that is show that not only did the Exodus not occur, not only was there not an influx of Semitic people that came in around any of the proposed dates for any of the proposed claims about the historicity of the Exodus, all 4 or 5 of them are the opposite. The times when they say that the Exodus happened are times when it was abandoned due to drought or famine. The people who actually lived there were semi-nomadic. They had crops and they had goats. And when it was like that, they would just leave. They would go elsewhere with their goats, right? Then they would come back, or they would go elsewhere and the rain didn't come, and they'd come back when the rains did come. The Exodus is the opposite of the historical record. It's not just that we haven't found the evidence that will show the
Exodus
Exodus
is wandering for 40 years.
Yes,
No,
the
they
existence
say more
of a big
most
settlement
in the
of Jewish
modern
people
Calasia.
at any particular time, which is supposed to be the Exodus, is not the case. What actually is the case is it was mostly depopulated during those times. It fluctuated up and down very gradually over thousands of years.
And the actual site that they were supposed to have stayed at, we found, and for the most part, the only place we found there is one Hyksos outpost.
So that's just the beginning of the physical historical record that contradicts all of the versions of the Exodus story. Then we go to the conquest. Every single city that was supposed to be conquested has evidence of being long abandoned by the time of any of the proposed dates of the conquest, being attacked by an entirely different group, like the Sea People.
How are they dated, though?
There's different evidence for each one of them. You're gonna have to go through. You're gonna have to look at the evidence. Okay. In the, like, just to pick one example, Jericho. So Jericho had frequent earthquakes, right? But it was continuously settled. It's one of the oldest human cities on Earth, right? It goes back like almost 3,000 years of continuous, or not continuous, but like fluctuating settlements. One of the reasons it kept getting abandoned is because there were frequently earthquakes and disasters that caused it to be uninhabited. By the time of the supposed conquest, it was uninhabited. It had already had a big earthquake and had a fire and had disasters long before any conquest happened. So the story is talking about a city that was abandoned at the time that they claimed that they conquered it. The evidence is so overwhelming, and you are so unfamiliar with it at this point, that whatever you read from like Christian archaeologists and Jewish archaeologists who are like
I don't follow
trying to
Christian
prove an
archaeologists.
orthodox position, they state
follows
in
the
their
Bible.
They
faith
state, but I don't
policies.
listen to them. I
They
don't
state
go.
in their faith policies that their institution will fire them if they contradict the Bible.
So again, I'm making something clear. They might state something, but just because someone states something doesn't mean I hearken unto it. So basically, I do not listen to so-called Christian archaeologists. I think they're just as stupid as real archaeologists.
Okay. Well, if you look into this stuff, you will find a lot to chew on and to analyze. And you've said before that you're very analytical and you have a long history of reading, and you seem very deeply read in the Bible, which is great for the study of the Bible. But you need to study the
not
extra
sure he
biblical
even
sources that
is.
give you context to fully understand the Bible. So I commend you to the journey in these 3 sources. And I would love to talk to you again maybe next week when you come back and have familiarize yourself with something.
So you're shutting me down but we haven't spoken about slavery at all. Even though technically
Each one of these topics
Well,
requires you to actually do some more reading, and we have
so
other people
basically
that
you
want to
send
talk.
people away after like you tell them to read something and then you send them away feeling all high and mighty, but you won't let them talk about what they think.
Mr. Fire, you've been here for 46 minutes. I'm not saying that we shouldn't
Can I
give you
be
more
here for
time or
another
whatever.
46 minutes? I'm perfectly fine with that.
Sure,
So
you
we're
Because
gonna
I
call
haven't
it.
gotten to talk about what
You
I
have
want to
3
talk about.
sources to look into, and we can talk to you next week.
But you're not looking into my sources at all. You're just telling me, like, as if you're like a superior, like,
The
authority.
stuff
It's
you
weird.
cited, we were already familiar with, so you haven't given a source that we're not familiar with.
Were you familiar with Psalms 22:6? Do you know the etymology of that?
I was gonna say your
We
source is
discussed
the
it.
Bible.
Yes, exactly, because I'm a human who uses sources that consist of books. Yay! Super
And
cool.
the literary etymology of the
After
word
he
is
just
not going to be
insulted
authoritative
reading.
against like the preponderance of physical evidence that the book is
Can't
ahistorical.
even.
So the fundamental question, you began with the claim that it all lines up. So your
Yes.
first thing that you have to prove to yourself, because it sounds like it's foundational, is the belief that this truly all lines up, which means that if there is a single error or inaccuracy that is
Mhm.
incontrovertible and cannot be dismissed, that you can't just like explain away by saying, oh, the scientists be lying and stuff. If
Yeah.
that's the case, then you have to take that and then continue to expand on that and see if there's more evidence like that.
I understand, but you deny, like, just as I deny most of science and archaeology and carbon dating and stuff. Well, not carbon dating, but like the old dating. I don't understand anything besides carbon dating. Anyhow, it's like you deny the Bible in the same way I deny the institution of science, which I see as more of a religion. I think there's great things that will come out of science, but I think I see it as mostly a religion. But yeah. Have you read Psalm 22:6? Have you read like there's a lot of things that like you guys have gone to the atheist side. I've gone to like the religious side, and I think it's good to like share that. You know.
So I grew up very religious. Yes, I've read the books. No, I don't
So
find
have
it
you read Psalm
authoritative.
22:6?
Yes, a long time ago, right?
Do you know
It
the
is
Hebrew
not.
word that is used for worm?
You already mentioned it, right? I
I know
don't care.
that's why I want to.
I
I know you don't
You
care.
mentioned
So
that
why would
it's a
you bring
crimson
people on
worm,
here?
etc.
So you
I
basically
don't
want to
care.
bring
If you
people
want to
on
have a
here to
dialogue,
teach people
you
about.
have to actually have a point that is
Well, I have a
pertinent
point, but
to
you
the
won't let me
discussion.
explain why they used the word crimson worm instead of worm.
It's not going to be authoritative over the ahistoricity of the entire book.
So your
It's just
point
not.
is to bring theists on here to basically mock them and feel all high and mighty, and then it's weird. It's like a spit roast. Doesn't
So
make
I'm
sense.
presenting an countervening argument that says that none of this matters if it's ahistorical and it doesn't line up the way you think it does. And for
What
you to
if?
counter that, you're going to have to do reading.
But
Or at
even
least
if I
watch
did reading,
videos.
you would just give me more. You're not even listening to what I'm giving. You're just giving out what you want to give, and then you're mocking. Like, I mean,
Because it holds
dude,
no
this
weight if it's not a
transgender person has
historical book.
been making fun of me this entire time.
It's not making fun of you when someone presents an argument. It's called
No, they read
syllogism.
Psalm 22 like they were reading like someone's death sentence.
Okay. If the Bible is historical, then the evidence will show that it is accurate.
But
The
if you
evidence
don't
does
read
not
the whole
show that it
Bible,
is
how are you
accurate.
going to refute
The
it?
Bible is not
like,
historical.
Yes, but you guys are even You're like, oh, it's not historical, so I won't read it. It's like, cool. So you're willfully ignorant.
Bible, and you tried to talk over me the entire time.
No. You were reading it in like you were just reading it, but you didn't understand what you were reading at all because when I tried to explain it, you guys just made fun of me.
You were trying to talk over me. So don't say that we don't care about the Bible and we're not trying to use.
Well,
the
can
Bible.
I explain why why those verses are fine?
Well,
Can I explain why Deuteronomy 21 is okay?
I'm going to pause for a second, Mr. Fire. So the Hebrew word for worm is tala'at. Please.
No, it's tolat.
That is literally what I just said. Okay.
You said talat.
Please,
It's tolat.
Mr.
It's
Fire.
Lohomora.
I know. For the love of your God, explain how that makes slavery okay. Why or how does that tie your God from the Old Testament to the New Testament?
Oh no. The Psalm 22 proves Jesus. That's not a slavery argument. That's a Jesus
ties
argument.
the Old Testament to the New Testament because Jesus isn't in the Old Testament. There are no prophecies of Jesus.
Actually, he appears first in the garden.
Where? In the garden.
So the Lord was walking in the garden. They were ashamed. That was the Son. That was the Lord. In fact, the Lord is
I'm sorry,
Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and
Jesus
Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh
was,
in Proto-Hebrew actually means behold the hand.
Jesus was a
It's the
person.
hand
He was
behold,
born
and now
2,000
behold.
years ago. And so, no, he wasn't in the Garden of Eden. Also, keynote, the
So
Garden of
he
Eden never
resurrected, and
existed.
so the Son is
Garden of
eternal,
Eden is
right? I don't know if you know that.
Mesopotamian
So
myth.
the Son was there in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word in the original Greek, obviously. In English, it says, and the Word was God.
Okay,
But
but that
Genesis
was
1 is a polemic against the Babylonian Enuma Elish. And
Well,
it's
you can say that, but
totally
even
is.
if it was, like, I'll humor you.
No,
Imagine if it
100%.
was. Imagine they predicted the Messiah 200
But they
years
didn't
before it
predict the
happened and
Messiah.
predicted the exact way he would die.
I tried to
Like-
give you a verse where you Christians use as a verse and about it, and you wouldn't even let me say that one either.
I apologize. Go ahead.
I've got to bring it up again. Oh no, I've got it here. So Isaiah 7:13-17.
All
And
right, I'll
Isaiah
read
said,
that.
"Hear thou, David, your house of David. It is not enough to try the patience of humans. Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore, the Lord Himself will give you a sign. The virgin shall conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. Before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of two kings you dread will be laid waste, and the Lord will bring on you and your people and on the house of your father any time since, like Ephraim, broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria." Christians like to use this because it talks about virgin, even though it's a mistranslation from Alma to Virgo in Tactica, from Aramaic into Greek. At the end, it
Every
says very
time he
plainly that it's
jumps to
talking about the
something new.
coming of the kingdom of Assyria because
This
it's
guy.
talking about a very specific battle.
Oh,
Lord,
he's silent.
Give me a second, I'm rereading it.
By the way, I'm using the New International Version because it was the first one that came up.
I see. I use the KJV, or the original Greek, or the original Hebrew. Depends.
I usually use the NSR, New Standard Revised Version. Whatever.
I would suggest using the KJV only because
Yeah, I
there's
know,
a
but
few
it's
there's a
still
few
bad.
words that are mistranslated, but besides that, it's pretty accurate.
Are you aware that King James literally had numerous words redacted and replaced with other words because he just didn't like them? Like,
Well, yeah,
tyrant.
that's why I read the original Greek and Hebrew at times. When I'm confused, I look at the original text.
Like James's Shakespearean language is very like poetic and speaks to us, I think, more than most other translations. But as for accuracy, like it's woefully inaccurate.
That's why I go to the original text. I understand that there are inaccuracies in the
Also, Isaiah is
translations.
not originally in Greek.
Say that again?
Isaiah is originally in neither of those languages. It's originally a Hebrew text.
I understand. That's why I go to the original Hebrew text as well. Oh, wait, whoa. Wait. You have painted, wait, hold up. I'm reading this. It says, "The Lord shall bring upon thee and thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, even the king of Syria. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. And they shall come and shall rest all of them in the desolate valleys, and the holes of the rocks, and upon all the thorns, and upon all bushes. In the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired, namely by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head, the hair of the feet."
So it's even saying further that Assyria is going to be God's instrument because it's not talking about Jesus.
No. It's
even
saying
further
the
that
Lord shall bring
Assyria
upon
is
thee
going to be God's
and
instrument because it's not talking
upon
about
thy
Jesus.
people and upon thy father's house.
No.
It's
It's
saying
saying
have
further
not
that
the Lord
come.
shall bring
Assyria
upon
is
the
going to
day
be God's
of, and
instrument
it
because it's
describes
not
something
talking about Jesus.
that, if I'm not mistaken, happened in the past to the Israelite people that was tumultuous. And so it says, days have not come. You will bring upon your people
The
days that
literal
have not
chapter is
come
talking about Jerusalem being
from
under
that time.
siege and Ezekiel making a prophecy about the end of the siege. He's not talking about Jesus in the slightest.
I know, but it says in that time, your people will have days that are brought to
Because you can
them.
read into it different things doesn't state that that's not what it means. It's literally talking about the end of a siege, at the end of during a battle in Jerusalem, and how the king of Assyria is going to be used as God's weapon to stop the siege. It's literally what it's on about.
So why does it say Emmanuel's birth?
Because it's talking about a specific woman in Jerusalem at that time, saying that before that woman, who's like literally pregnant now, the king of Assyria will come and save you.
Is it Hezekiah?
It's Ezekiel.
Ezekiel. Okay, because I know Isaiah 9:6. People say that that's
Oh, yeah,
actually referencing Hezekiah.
Sorry, my bad.
Is it Ezekiel?
Isaiah. No, it's Isaiah. I said that wrong. It's my bad.
But Isaiah isn't Isaiah the. Wait, hold up.
It says
Isn't-
Isaiah said.
I know you're saying Isaiah was the virgin. Sorry, Isaiah was the baby, the Emmanuel.
No, I'm saying Isaiah is the one saying it because he's the one in the middle of the siege.
I know, and he's prophesying about who is going to be born
The
of a
end
virgin
the
woman.
siege, the kingdom of Assyria, the king of Assyria coming and stopping the siege.
No. My point is, he says, like it says, a virgin will conceive and bear a son, and he will eat butter and honey before he like. Who is that baby?
It's just a random baby. It's just a.
Aha,
He's not
cool.
Old Testament
So
Mari.
you said it was
We're talking
Ezekiel.
about a woman who's alive. At
You
that
are
time,
the father.
giving birth because of a mistranslation from the Aramaic into Greek, or the Hebrew into Greek, or whatever, from Alma.
Really?
to
What does the
Virgil.
original Aramaic say?
I literally just said it says Alma, which means young woman.
Yes, a young woman is implied to be virgin. That's the entire
No,
until the
that's-
modern day, young women were virgins.
Uh-huh.
Like the whole concept of Jewish culture is that you're not supposed to fornicate before you're married.
Right.
So when it says a young woman, it means virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Fire, can I just ask, like, why was Mary a virgin? Because she was married.
Well, she didn't know her husband until Jesus was given birth to.
Okay, that's kind of weird, don't you think? Married.
Well, it can be weird to someone who doesn't understand the mystery of the Lord. If you read the Bible, you understand why.
Why?
Because the Mary could not be corrupted, right? She had to be basically
She was married. Why can't you have sex with your own husband?
What? Wait, hold up. Was Mary? Were they just married, or were they married? Was Mary married to Joseph when she had Jesus? Let's see. Okay, Mary was married to Joseph when Jesus was born. While
Got
she-
Games of Thrones for a second.
Say that again.
Nothing.
Oh, when I said when Mary was married to Jesus, yeah, that's a little bit weird. Yeah, that's exactly how I remember it. Okay, so basically they were betrothed to one another. But okay, imagine you get with a woman, she gets pregnant. You're gonna assume she cheated, right? So the thing, or
Yep.
was an infidel. So basically, they were engaged, you could say, betrothed to one another, and then she conceived. She didn't conceive after they were married. They were to be married, and then she conceived. And they were like, "Whoa, hold up." And then I think Joseph was told, like, "Don't worry, she didn't cheat on you. This is, the Lord has come upon her," or whatever. So yeah. Huh. Okay. Whoa. Wait. Nope. There's an article here. Hold up. Got to get multiple sources here. Hold up. Okay. Da-da-da-da.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
getting more. Now I'm getting conflicting sources, but now I get.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah.
This article isn't saying they weren't engaged. It says they were betrothed. To modern readers, we see no distinction, but in ancient Jewish culture, that distinction meant everything. They were two steps for marriage. The first being the betrothal, or erusin, wherein the couple formally committed to marriage. At this time, they were legally considered married. They were referred to as husband or wife, and they could only end their marriage through death or divorce. They were not, however, legally able to consummate their marriage until after the second step of the marriage process, called nisuin, or the formal home-taking ceremony. The interval between these two events could last as long as a year. Wow, gosh, dang. And then it says, during this time, the bride prepared for the ceremony and for her upcoming move, and the husband was expected to prepare the home that he would bring his wife into. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, they were basically engaged. In modern day speaking, they were what you would call Jewish version of engaged, which is extremely complicated and consists of not being able to have sex, but you're still called a husband and wife. So yeah, pretty sad for Joseph and Mary, but super happy because she conceived. She gave a virgin birth to Jesus.
Or she cheated on him.
Maybe, but it does say that a virgin woman shall conceive, and his name will be. It's like, unto us a son will be born, unto us a son is given. He will be called the mighty God, the Counselor. And then in Isaiah 7, it says something. I'm going to actually look what Isaiah 7 is about.
Prophecy, trying to say, because the Jews don't agree with this.
But you say that the baby born in Isaiah 7 is just a baby. Why is the baby not mentioned?
The ancient Hebrew for Alma for virgin is Batola, not virgin.
Mm-hmm.
So when it says Alma, it says young woman, and it doesn't say virgin. In fact, actually,
I understand that. So in the modern conception of like
no, it's not
virgin,
modern conception. Ancient Hebrew has two different words.
Oh, what are the two different words?
Batola is the ancient Hebrew word for virgin.
Where does it appear in the Bible?
I don't know.
Okay, so let me look it up myself. All right, so what is the ancient Hebrew word for virgin? And then I'm going to look it up myself, because if the Bible only uses, okay, so Betula is virgin and Alma is young woman. It doesn't specifically denote virginity. Betula is a more precise and consistently used term for virgin in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, I'm going to look up Betula occurrence in the Bible. Betula, where is this word found in the Tanakh? Let's see. The word Betula, meaning virgin or maiden, appears in the Tanakh in several contexts. It is often used to describe young unmarried women and carries a significant cultural and religious weight, particularly in the context of marriage. Okay, so the servant of Abraham in Genesis 24, verse 43, seeking a wife for Isaac, describes his meeting with Rebekah using the term Alma, which, while not directly translated as virgin, often refers to a young unmarried woman. The sister of Moses, Miriam, is described as an Alma, entrusted to watch over the baby Moses. Isaiah 7:14, this famous verse where the term Alma is used to describe a young woman who will conceive and give birth to a son, who will be called Emmanuel. By the way, can I make something very clear? Condoms and like what is it called, like contraceptive measures were not really, like, obviously you could like throw yourself down a set of stairs, but it's kind of difficult to make stairs if you're living in a shack. Anyhow, long story, that was a little joke. But usually when people had sex in Levitical times, or like, I mean, even in Babylonian times, usually conception would follow, right? Unless you're having sex with a woman like on her period, and that's not really wise, because then you would be unclean for entering into the temple. It's complicated. Anyhow, but yeah, when it says a young woman will conceive and give birth to a son, that implies that she's a virgin. Like, it's kind of one and the same. You know what I mean?
I also
talking about a very specific event at a very specific time.
Okay, so what is the name of the baby? What's the name of that baby?
Well, a lot of times they don't have names. Like, if you were to ask what was the Pharaoh's name in the Moses story, would you be able to give it?
Let me look it up, because there was actually an Instagram reel I saw that actually lined up.
Their
the
name
dates
is
for
Pharaoh. That's Pharaoh, and then he gets replaced by another guy named Pharaoh. But I also just want to put down from Bart Ehrman, says the most likely place that Jesus came from was that Mary and Joseph had sex. And that is the most likely.
But that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that she was a virgin.
But
not
I'm
for
saying,
life. Don't get confused. The Catholics will tell you she was a virgin for life. She was not.
Fire. I was saying what actually happened, which is different from, unfortunately, the biblical account of what happened.
I know, but when a scientist who hates the Bible says, "Oh yeah, she was probably just maybe she's a whore," like, that's not. I don't really trust that person.
Bart Ehrman is a New Testament scholar, so that's good to know.
Bart Ehrman, isn't he an atheist?
He is.
Bart Ehrman. I understand. So I trust people who do not hate the Bible.
Sure, but you have to understand, Mr. Fire, we were all like you once. We were all theists. We used to be believers, but then we did research. We oftentimes read our holy books, and it led us to the conclusion
So what
that a
is
God
Psalm?
doesn't exist.
So Psalm 22, verse 16. There are certain
Yep.
translations that say lions are at my hands and my feet. Now, the difficulty with this is that this disproves Jesus. Well, not absolutely, because you can easily go to the etymology and realize there's I think it's a yud and a vav, and basically is it a yud or a vav? Is that what
But
it is?
Mystifier, this stuff is
Yeah.
only relevant to
So-
theists. To us, this looks like you are taking shells in the ocean and trying to map them out. Like none of this tracks.
Well,
with
I'm
the
actually
people
giving
who
you the
follow.
etymology, like the history of the mistranslation of there was a word. It was like lion and then into like nails pierce my hands and my feet, and it's like they dug through. So in the Septuagint, if I'm not mistaken, it says like they dug into my hands and my feet.
But can I give you more like potent questions? Biologically, people can't come back from the dead. We have no evidence of that happening except for people in the Bible claiming that it happened.
Okay. So that just means you need to read 1 Corinthians 3.
See, but you just say that, keep on, but we've read the Bible. The Bible
No,
isn't a historical text.
What is so I'm not going to ask you what 1 Corinthians 3 is like every word. I'm going to just, what is the general, like, what is 1 Corinthians 3 about? What is the main point? Because this is one of the chapters that I was just like, what, like as a former
the
atheist, I was
church and
atheist at
its
that time.
leaders.
A while ago.
No, so
But
1 Corinthians
why-
3 is not about the church and its leaders. I'll read you 1 Corinthians 3.
Okay,
It's a
well,
beautiful
you
chapter.
disagree with what the Bible Gateway says, and I have it here. I could read it as well. Instead of just reading it word for word,
So I'll read 1
not.
Corinthians
But
3.
Mystifier,
So it says,
Mystifier. No, this is pointless. You're not going to be able to use
well, it's
the
pointless
Bible.
when you refuse to read the Bible. So
Mystifier.
the Bible
Well, no,
actually says,
Mystifier, we keep on trying to go into the Bible. The Bible is not going to be an accurate way to get us to your God.
well, you were saying it talks about the leaders of the church, but it actually isn't. It's talking about the wisdom of where does it say? Yeah, it says, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, for it is written, he taketh the wise in their own craftiness. It's a beautiful chapter.
Sure. It
It's
was written
literally
by men
speaking to people.
and inspired by men. That's the
You're
problem.
right. That's why Psalm 22 actually is describing the precise way Jesus was crucified and when he rose 3 days later. Look up the life cycle of a crimson worm.
Mystifier.
Okay?
People don't resurrect from the dead. Do you understand? After 72 hours of decomposition, the body breaks down. Do you have any mechanism by which he was resurrected? How did God do it?
So the female worm, the crimson or scarlet worm, the female worm attaches herself to a tree, forms a hard red shell, and lays her eggs. The larvae hatch and feed on the mother's body for 3 days. It says a few days, it's 3 days. After which she dies, releasing a crimson dye that stains her offspring and the tree.
Cool.
The mother's
That
body
did
eventually
happen
turns
to
white and
Jesus.
flakes off, resembling snow. Now, the babies are marked red for their entire lives, and they're marked red to defend against, like, to deter predators. So that is actually the word used in verse 6 of Psalm 22, which is beautiful because it describes the saving blood of Jesus
Mystifier,
Christ. We were
did
sealed.
the apostles
I mean,
start
you know,
eating his body? He died, and then they were like, we have no more to eat. We need to eat his body. And then they went off, and they did this process over
Real
and
quick.
over like these worms do.
Gilgamesh.
I feel like I'm talking to that Charlie Kelly in that episode of It's Always Sunny where he's like looking up against the wall with the
Yes, that's what I meant with seashells. Exactly,
Yeah,
just like that.
He's up against a wall like with his hands
tacks.
apart and he's
Mhm.
telling about whatever. There's like pinned maps with notes everywhere. I feel like that's what we're talking to right now.
Because Mystifier, I know you think you understand it. You said I have actually found the truth. But
I have.
okay, I know you believe that, or I know you know it's knowledge, but I would highly disagree. I do not think that the Bible is a good methodology for deciphering truth.
That's why a prophecy came true 200. Like, even if the Dead Sea Scrolls are not, all the way back in Levitical times, 200 years is a huge jump for such vast details. Isn't that crazy? Like, there's like so many details that were fulfilled, and it's like, whoa, crazy, let's believe this. Because, I mean, it's truth. And a lot more truth than like science. I don't know. Most of science is
No,
kind
I
of
would say
lobbyism.
science is probably, since they actually build things like planes and trains
Do you
and
know what Swire
automobiles
syndrome
and
is?
My
medicine.
brother in atheism, you already know that atheism is the light, the life, and the way. I used to be a Christian, just
Do you know
like
what Swire
everybody
syndrome
else
is?
here. Listen, my brother. I used to be a Christian.
I'm not an
Just like
atheist.
everyone of sound mind is an atheist. My brother an atheist. Anyways, so
You're gaslighting me. Please don't gaslight me.
I'm just letting you know that everyone of sound mind is an atheist, right? So
That's true in your reality, but in my reality, I think that the Lord is the truth, the light, and the way.
yeah, I'm sure
Oh,
you think
well,
that.
well done.
But anyways, we all used to be atheists or Christians, and now we're atheists, right? We used to be where you were. We used to think the Great Flood, maybe not everyone, but I used to think the Great Flood and Noah's Ark were real things that were actually physically possible, right? Those seemed real to me at one point, but then I got educated, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did he cut out?
Oh, that was it. I got
No,
educated.
Oh. I see. So
I read the Atrahasis and the Tales of Gilgamesh, and I read the Enuma Elish, and I read other things where Genesis clearly took stuff from, and I went, oh, they robbed it from that. Fair enough.
I see.
Yeah, Plato's
So
Timaeus has the dual creation account. It has the God made the physical world first and it was perfect, and then a different creation happened where all the human stuff was made and that was flawed and messed up and caused problems. It's all in Timaeus, which is once again one of these sources that's very late and suggests that the Septuagint version of Genesis that we ended up with is indebted to Hellenic Timaeus more than it is ancient Hebrew or Mideastern stories. Even though they appear as elements in the story, the structure is Timaeus from Plato.
So
by the way,
if
Taciturn, just a quick question. Did you get my DMs? So I sent you some message requests, but you have to click on
I see.
the direct messages and you have to click on message requests. Most people don't see them unless you say something.
I see. Yeah, actually, that is very
So
true.
I give you two books and I give you 2 documentaries and I'll give you some more to
I can totally check those out. But my point is, if you see that something was created before another thing, and I don't know, the Bible says, Genesis says how the world was created. What if Gilgamesh just took from that and they made
it's not in Gilgamesh. Here's the thing. It's not in Gilgamesh. It's in Timaeus, right? So the Gilgamesh story, there are a couple of elements of the Enuma Elish that are in there. God breathing upon the deep is very similar to Marduk defeating Tiamat and so on. There's all sorts of stories that are in there that are from Mideastern sources. But the crazy thing is that Genesis is most indebted not to Near Eastern sources. It's Hellenic. It's indebted to Plato's Timaeus. The dual creation account, where 2 different
Plato's
kinds of
Timaeus.
deities.
Wait, Plato's?
Yes, Timaeus. Timaeus. Plato says, "Let me tell you a likely explanation for the world as we know it." And then he tells this myth that he makes up called the Timaeus creation myth, where he says that everything began with a perfect, a divine watchmaker, basically, who makes the universe in one perfect way as a series of natural laws and then has no further intervention with it. And then a different kind of deity entirely creates all the human stuff, and all the human stuff goes amok. And it's very, very similar to the dual creation account. In Genesis, we have 2 creation stories that scholars used to think they were just sandwiched together from 2 different versions of creation that got combined. But they make a lot more sense when you show that the first versions we have of it are in Septuagint, and Septuagint came out after Timaeus. And Timaeus was one of the most popular books by Plato prior to the Septuagint's composition. So it makes more sense that Genesis is actually heavily indebted to Timaeus than to all the earlier Mideastern sources that it gets stuff from as well.
Also, I just want to, first of all, send a shout out there for thank you, Mr. Fire, for continuing to talk with us. I want to ask you a question in a second, but if you do want to join us, just raise your hand. I see Paul is there. We'll get to you in a moment. But Mr. Fire, I at least want to ask you one more thing, which is Leviticus 44:46. Just real straight, because I think that this really highlights your male and female slaves are to come from nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary. Leviticus 25, 44 to 46.
All right.
You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly.
Oh, I didn't even get to the Deuteronomy 21 thing or the Numbers 31 or whatever.
That's
but
true, but let's just, or maybe it's true. I think we did actually cover a lot of good
No,
ground, but nonetheless, Leviticus 25, 44 to 46. Seems
Well,
like
so what
clear
it's
cut
saying is
slavery.
don't. Well, yeah, the slavery isn't a bad thing. Chattel slavery is a bad thing.
Oh
but
my God.
So
Which the Bible
like
endorses.
slavery.
The Bible endorses
No,
chattel
no.
slavery
So,
of nations around you. It just says don't do it to fellow Jews.
well, they're prisoners of war. They're the Canaanite enemies.
No.
So I don't know if that's a problem.
It says you can buy them. It says buy them from your neighbors. It is okay.
Yeah. Slavery isn't wrong. I keep trying to tell people this. Like it's
But
it's
that
Yeah,
sounds
slavery isn't a
evil.
bad-
That's clear. Okay.
Well, it
Because of
sounds
what-
evil, but I think what's more evil is
Because of
telling
what-
people that Swire syndrome is actually females with Y chromosomes, when really it's a genetic
Oh
mutation
boy.
of hormonal
Oh, well,
distribution
that
rather
was a
than
topic well.
chromosomal mutation.
Seriously, what does that have to do with anything?
I tried to bring up
Because
Swire
it
syndrome
gets
earlier and I
into
was
the
silenced.
You know, that's the
Because
that's
you're
the whole point.
tangenting.
I'm not tangenting. I'm trying to say that like when a transgender tells me that
Tangent-
I'm not following
tangent the
science,
whole time.
it's kind of like telling me that science is.
Okay.
That is so. Well, I just like to
Yeah,
point.
we're not. Hang on.
I love when people hide their power
I
level
was
for how
actually-
bigoted they are for like a good hour, wasting our time only
So
to finally just pull the card out.
I was about to mute him there, but you're not gonna do that on the server. So this is the only warning you'll get. Just talk to people like they're people.
And I'm
Right.
not.
We have a hand up in the audience. We have a new guest.
Yeah, we can move on. I
Dude,
am gonna
yeah.
unmute him and then move him to the audience because otherwise it'll just leave him muted forever.
You forgot to give him enough time to yell the N-word a bunch of times or something.
Yeah, I did. But that guy was just rejecting the truth and his unrighteousness, right? He just wants to pretend to be a main character in an imaginary cosmic battle of good and evil.
Yeah.
That
Can I make just one quick comment? And that is, I would say, comments like that show that he is getting more defensive than I am. Because again, that has nothing not only to do with the subject, but if being transgender, gender, that whole subject, it's a social, psychological phenomena. If there was any evidence close to what we have for being transgender, intersex, I can't even pronounce it, the specific type of Schwartz-Jakob syndrome. I was trying actually to look it up. Nonetheless, we get nothing for any of the miracles, any of the walking on water, wine, any of the separation it sees. And so please focus. Don't do the lowbrow or low-hanging whatever, the gender identity politics, because that tells me that you can't defend slavery. It was very clear, and I'll continue to say slavery is evil, and you're probably a good, well, whatever the heck that was. Most people
was an
are
ad hom
good
is what that
people.
was.
Exactly. Nonetheless, I think religion makes good people say bad things, and where that comes from is religion.
Go ahead, Paul.
or dismiss reasoning for bad reasons.
Indeed.
What would you like to talk about, Paul? You want to introduce yourself and tell us
Oh, hi.
your beliefs?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, I'm Paul. So of course I'm a Christian. And what was the other question you asked?
Oh, just what would you like to talk about in terms of your beliefs?
Oh, I mean, I guess we could just have like a brief, exchange of our beliefs, essentially.
Cool.
But I guess the question I had was, and of course I just want to have like a respectful dialogue. I listened to a little bit of the other conversation you guys had, and I kind of saw a little bit of tension growing. But
It won't
I
have
don't
that
want to have
long.
that happen.
Yeah.
No, yeah, probably. I'm sure it didn't. I don't have that much time. I got to hit the gym right now in a bit, so I won't take long. I promise.
Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. So, one question I had is, I'm really interested in finding out because I know a lot of people always talk about,
Thank you, Victoria.
on the atheist side, they always ask the theist side is, what's your evidence for God, and so on and so forth. And whenever I hear that, it's kind of cringy to me when I hear that. It just tells me that people aren't being honest with what they're asking about. And the reason I say that is because we all have the same exact evidence, right? But we all just have different paradigms of how we translate that evidence. In my
Sometimes
worldview,
people
I
aren't
see.
familiar with the evidence, like the experience that they have of their daily life. Yeah, that we all have in common, and we interpret that. Some people haven't read much or like looked hard to find a lot of the evidence.
Okay. No, yeah, and I can see that. So I guess what I want to understand is how is it that you all came to the conclusion that there is no God?
So we have the problem of evil. We have the complete lack of empirical evidence. We have the fact that there's abundant non-believers, and God somehow fails to persuade people to believe the right things, and more people believe against the right things than for them. We have the problem of completely inconsistent revelations, where every single religion has contradictory claims, and it's far more likely that they're all false than that one of them is the absolute truth. We have the fact from parsimony that the explanation, if any, that the biblical account gives is just fails in any kind of explanation comparison. What we would call the reasoning from the best explanation type of thinking doesn't even work with the Bible, because it can't even really make a cogent explanation for facts. It works only as a kind of like a just so story, like how the tiger got its spots, to sort of mythologize the world that we see with like post hoc rationalizations for it. It never explains or predicts how the world actually works. It just sort of says that it's a prophecy, even though we find out the prophecy was written late and is an ex eventu fake prophecy, like with Daniel, which is even a consensus amongst modern scholars who are Christians. They consider it to be a pious fraud by a believer who just like wanted to support the cause against the Greeks that they thought were persecuting them, and support the Hasmonid dynasty instead. And we just have logical paradoxes in the very nature of God itself. So with no knowledge of any specific theology, if you just explain the God omni properties, you can find that the belief that God is real does not follow, because there are logical inconsistencies between being omnipresent, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent and omniscient. And what most theodicies do you know what a theodicy is? It's like an apologetic for the problem of evil, to say that, well, there's a reason why God made that evil. You familiar with that category?
Well, and see, I see that differently. I guess because I don't see as God making evil. I just see as evil a privation of the good, the same way I would see blind
so
as a privation of science.
Privation theory is an attempt to explain away the fact that God could have done it differently by just saying, well, it's just the way that like God wanted it to be. So if you just say, well, evil is just the absence of good, then you can just pretend like you don't have to explain the preponderance of gratuitous evil that the majority of all living beings suffer under for the majority of all history and time. And
right,
you can only explain that away when you don't have heaven, right? So if God can't create heaven, then there's no problem with the way he creates earth. But if God is the architect of heaven, then there's a lot of explaining to do about the way that the earth is.
Okay, because I know you gave a lot of information. I mean, we can just tackle one little bit at a time, because I mean, you gave a whole lot of information. I really couldn't capture everything, right? But I guess we'll start with certain subjects, and one that really interests me is one they always use is the problem of evil, and I don't see why that even is a rebuttal to refute the existence of God, because the way I see it is evil. You've probably heard this. I'm sorry?
Can God create angels and heaven?
Correct. Yes.
He did, right? According to the story. Okay.
Yes.
So could God make the earth even slightly more similar to angels or heaven?
If he chose to.
Okay. So any one of the evils on the earth, or the privations of good, could just be different if God wanted to be a little more heaven-like and to make us a little more like angels, right?
Not necessarily, no.
Why?
Well, because we're made different, right? We're made the way I like to explain it, and like I said, this is just me, right? And basically just to understand, you're asking why God didn't make us more like angels?
Yeah, it's very easy because it's within the text. We're comparing two things in the same text.
Okay. So why God didn't make us like angels? I mean, essentially we are his creation, right? We're just another form of his creation that made us with free will, because angels essentially don't have free will. We do have free will.
Did Lucifer have free will?
So he made us with evil in us.
Did
Will
Lucifer
not
have
make
free
us
will?
with evil. To a
Did
certain
Lucifer
extent, yeah.
have free will?
He did make
To
evil.
it. I mean, yeah. I mean, well, he didn't make evil. He made good. Anything not good, which is a privation,
evil in us,
would be
then
evil.
he made evil as well. Because he
You're,
introduced
Well, no.
it into the
you're still quiet,
It's like
shaking.
saying,
Can you speak up?
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I
if
thought-
it's like saying, yeah, he didn't make evil. For example, like if he created me to be able to see things, and all of a sudden I get blind, God didn't create the blind. He just created, like in the Bible says, when he created in Genesis, when he created all things good. And evil only came about the world is through the sin between Adam and Eve. I mean, that's how evil started in my worldview, right? And I'm not going to say I'm not saying you guys should believe that, right? But I'm just saying that's where we believe that's how evil came about.
Look, either
But
you
again,
think that God is just the definition of good and everything he does
correct.
can't be bad because he is the definition of good. If you
Yes.
are a metaphysical divine command theorist, which I can show you why that's incoherent, but if you are,
Mhm.
then you're not really having an honest discourse with anyone who brings this up because you just don't believe that it's even possible. Anything that God does be anything but perfect. By definition,
Correct.
his
And I do
will
believe
is
that.
what perfection means, right? So you're not
Correct.
really having a real discourse with people because we're talking about the world where it's bad to do bad stuff to people. And you're talking about a world
And-
where it's fine to do whatever God says. It's not bad. It's good because God said to do it.
No, not necessarily. So you say you're giving you're making a lot of assumptions of what is good now. So I mean, what is your standard of good? How do you determine what that is? If it's not
If
God,
I torture
wanna know
you
what that is.
to the point where you wish for death and beg me to kill you, is that good?
Well, to my view, no. But I can actually have a standard behind that. What's yours?
Is your standard thou shalt not retsack?
No.
'Cause
Well,
I didn't
no.
actually
My
say kill
standard.
you.
Okay. Well, but that's still. But now you're doing a too cool quay. You're asking me. I'm asking you for a standard. Asking me the question of what it is that you're not
Yes, I'm
answering the
asking you
question.
what your standard is. So you claim that there is a
Correct.
divine command, I assume, that
Correct.
that tells you
Yes.
not to do a bad thing. So we could pick one like thou
Correct.
shalt not retsack, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
if thou
That's
shalt
fine.
not retsack is the original commandment, and that is the universal standard
But you're
for
making
our
you're
behavior.
creating certain other things that aren't even in my worldview at this point. Well, using that term red sack, I really don't mean what you're trying to say by that. If you just mean just like torture, I guess.
No, retsack, what it actually says, there is no thou shalt not kill commandment. That's completely mistranslated. Thou shalt not
Right. That
retsack
sounds.
was the original Hebrew commandment. Okay, you're familiar with it? You know the 10 Commandments?
No, I'm sorry. I'm familiar with the Ten Commandments. I never heard that red sack. What does that mean?
Oh no. Okay, so you don't know what the Bible says. Okay, so the Bible was written in Hebrew in the Old Testament mostly, with a little bit of Aramaic and stuff. So
Yeah.
there's even some Greek because of stuff like Daniel, right?
Right.
So, and the Septuagint, a lot of it was probably written in Greek actually.
Right.
So
Mhm.
thou shalt not retsack is the original commandment that most people would say is thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill. Okay, you don't know what it means, but what it actually means, if you look up retsack, is blood atonement. So a blood atonement killing is a killing for which your next of kin is obligated, if they're able-bodied and physically, capable of doing it, to seek out and get revenge for the murder, an eye for an eye style. They must kill the murderer of their kin. That's what retsack means. And the exception to retsack is that if you go to a religious city that is presided over by a Jewish judge, and there were only 12 holy cities at the time that they said this. If you go to one of the holy cities, then you could be under the protection of the judge until the judge rules in your case, or a jubilee in which every once in a while the holy rite would occur, which would be the changing of the high priest of the temple. In which case you would lose all revenge rights against that person. That is the divine, universal, eternal will of God. Thou shalt not revenge, kill, unless they go to a holy city or hide long enough for the high priest to change. Is that a universal commandment we should follow today?
I've never heard that.
That's your standard,
very
right?
interesting. Well,
that is the actual
thing.
standard that you don't know.
I don't understand. I have to look into it. I wouldn't take your word, for example, to be the truth about it because I don't know. I've never heard this. This is the first time. But let's just go with that. Let's just go with that. Even if that was the case, right? What is your standard to determine what is good or bad?
Okay, so you believe that, for instance, if you were to kill a family member of mine, that I should seek you out and kill you unless you hide in one of the 12 holy Jewish cities or the high priest chambers?
We're still going with it. I'm still trying to understand because you said there's a problem of evil, right?
Yeah, you claimed you had a standard. And I'm asking
Right.
if you would uphold it if you understood it better.
So we're just judging, but what I know that standard to be, I won't take like from what you're saying, right? Because it's the first time I ever heard it. Okay, and I look into a little further. I have to look into a little more because
Yeah.
judging by what you're saying, it sounds like you're saying God allows vengeance. Okay, and
commands it,
vengeance is
yeah.
not allowed. He commands vengeance. That's what I'm hearing. Commands vengeance. I don't know what the context behind commanding vengeance is because vengeance in itself isn't evil, right? It wouldn't be evil. It all depends on how you're, I guess, using vengeance at this point. So I mean, let's say for example, when the U.S. took, I guess, in a sense, or even like in the Avengers, when the Avengers took vengeance against Thanos for destroying half the planet, was that evil? I mean, you know what I mean? I don't see it as evil.
The Avengers would be righteous as long as it was a family member that was killed by the aliens or Thanos or whatever. Which in the case of Thanos, he definitionally killed everyone's relatives. So everyone would have red sack against him by the Bible. Yeah.
Well, I mean, would that be considered evil at that point, right? I don't know, right? So that's what I'm still going back to. Then what would be this?
Yeah, it would be godly to kill Thanos because he killed a family member and he didn't hide in one of the 12 cities and there wasn't a change with the high priest.
Okay.
So the point is that this so-called standard that's so clear and so universal and so like stands the test of time is actually very contextual to Jewish law, to the time it was written, and all sorts of stuff like that makes this much harder to claim as your standard, right? And so unless you're going to actually understand all that stuff and like argue that you can really defend it, let's just admit that we're all actually operating in the world of like making moral arguments for things on the basis of whether they're good or bad.
Also, religion makes you defend Thanos.
Well, if we go with that, right? So it basically means that we're all making moral, odds on an arbitrary level, is what you're saying.
Well, they're not arbitrary because if you know what arbitrary means without justification, right? So when we make arguments, by definition, if there isn't a justification, it's not even an argument. It's just a vibe. If I say, I think you should kill so-and-so because I really think that, they're bad for the community and they're committing heresy or something like that. That's just a vibe. That's not really an argument, right? I haven't really presented evidence, like how bad are they? What are they doing to the community? And this is the kind of stuff that like people said against, say, I don't know, Socrates. They're just like, yeah, he's trouble. We don't like him. And that was enough to get him killed because he refused to defend himself, basically. But if he had actually spoken up, he probably could have acquitted himself. And many people acquit themselves because they have evidence and arguments. And if all that's presented against them is bad vibes, they can beat that because they have actual arguments, which just a vibe is not. So it's not arbitrary if there's an argument and it presents evidence and clear justification. So the idea that like it is immoral to like make clear arguments for why something is good or bad is crazy to me. I don't know why you would think that it's wrong to give moral arguments to justify what is good and bad.
So then that's the next question, right? So how do you justify an arbitrary moral argument or a moral decision?
So it's not arbitrary. I already established that. If you justify it, it ceases. Look, an arbitrary justification is like a square circle. You're just contradicting what the word means.
That's why I asked that, right? So how do you justify that?
Okay. People actually justify moral decisions based on a whole host of different reasoning types. And in the legal profession, we call the judgment of the most learned and most expert and most carefully chosen judges, we call it jurisprudence. Jurisprudence is the consideration of all the important ways of looking at a matter, right? And arguably, that is what people actually do when it comes to morality. We don't narrowly pick one type of morality and say, look, if the Bible says it, then it's good. Rape is okay. Slavery is okay. Killing people who killed your family members is okay because the Bible said it. That's not a good way to do morality. And no one actually does that anymore for the most part, right? Other than like a few terrorists and types like that. What we actually do is we look at a whole host of different reasons and then we try to come to the best conclusion after much, much careful consideration and debate.
Okay, so that's still kind of begging the question for me is how do you justify subjective moral claims? It's still going around the same circle again. I don't see.
We justify it the same way we justify every other kind of discourse, by trying to use the very best methodology that we have and trying to compare all the best knowledge and evidence that we have and to make the most cogent arguments for both sides and setting up a setting where people can present the strongest possible case for all the sides of the argument and no one is just sort of kicked out for lack of being able to have their well-presented argument heard. And the form that takes in the legal world is court, right? We have courts to determine like the biggest questions that have like moral significance to society.
Right. So then let's go, because I know we're going to give a lot of information here and it's going to be very ambiguous. So let's try to make it more precise by giving examples, right? And I'm going to go just give a simple example that we can all understand. Why is the rape of a child wrong subjectively?
It's very harmful both to the person who does it and to the victim.
What is there
And
to
to
determine
society.
what is harmful? What makes something harmful to society?
Well, at the most base level, we can measure the effect that something has on someone's outcome. Regardless, let's say, because you can go down like I've been down these arguments many different pathways.
Yeah,
you can say, what if they're mentally incapable of speaking or saying that it's harmful? Like you can say, what if they're in a coma? You can make all these weird edge cases.
Well,
right?
let's not even go there. Let's not go there. Let's just go with a more simple way. So you say because it has a bad effect on society.
No.
Right.
So there's many bad effects. One of them is on society, right? But
many bad effects.
The primary bad effect, even if the person is like a vegetable, and even if no one ever hears about it and so on, is the person who does it is very messed up from the belief that they can do that. It means that they are more likely to do other bad things in the future. So like even Descartes, have you read Descartes? He said it was okay to torture animals from the perspective of them not having a soul and not really like feeling true pain. But he still said that you probably ought to discourage people from doing it because it probably means they're psychopaths, right? Because like if a person thinks it's okay to torture animals, it means they're probably danger to society. Even if it's actually okay, we shouldn't encourage it, right? And there's lots of examples like that. Cannibalism is bad for society, even if the person wants to be cannibalized, and even if the person who wants to cannibalize, tries to make justifications for it. There's lots of things like this where we have problems with cannibals, we have problems with rapists, and we have problems with murderers, even when they do it in some weird edge case where it's could be claimed to not have a harm that's noticeable.
But yeah, that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm questioning, right? How do you determine what is right or what is wrong compared to, let's see, a cannibal? You say cannibalism is wrong. I agree with you. Obviously, cannibalism is wrong. But what's to say that cannibalism is wrong as opposed to, let's say, for example, why is eating your neighbor wrong versus instead of helping your neighbor? What is the distinguish? What is the difference
to your neighbor? And
right, but what is the standard subjectively?
Is a defector from any group that they're a part of. If they're very selfish and very cruel to other people, then other people will have a problem with them in addition to the neighbor. That's why it's a problem for society, right?
That kind of falls into like an appeal to consensus fallacy, right? Because if most people think something is
consensus, right? It's an appeal to multiple lines of evidence.
For millions of years.
We're appealing to multiple lines of evidence.
Sorry, I just think that the one thing we're forgetting is that we were hunter-gatherers and we've been social creatures for millions of years. These aren't like inbuilt feelings from God. These are just inbuilt social structures from being social creatures and living out in the wilds.
Yeah, but how do you know that?
Expounded upon them because we started to become civilized and we needed to make new rules because instead of living out in, the jungles and savannas and swamps, we started to live in places like Göbekli Tepe or like and stuff like that. So we had to start making different rules. So different places made different rules and then they eventually battled each other and whoever won made the rules.
So let me ask it so I can better understand it. Let's say, for example, it's just me and then you. Two people live in this world. That's all that exists. You're under the belief that it's better to help your neighbor. Well, I'm under the belief I'm better off eating my neighbor, so I want to eat you. And it's only two of us existing at that time. Who is there to distinguish what?
The difference is the outcome means that you'll be wrong because instead of two people to do hunting and gathering together, you only have one, and you'll be more likely to starve. So the outcome is what determines it, isn't it?
Right, but then again, not all outcomes are determined to be good. Right?
Yeah,
we can agree with that. Right, not all outcomes are determined.
So how do you determine the outcome is what makes your decision to eat me, if we're the only two people in existence, bad?
So I guess at its source, what you're thinking is good then is what allows us to survive, correct?
Well, that's
essentially
the way
at its source.
With all social creatures throughout all mammals and other thingies that use them.
And who says it's good to survive, I guess, ultimately?
Well, yeah,
that's what I want to know. What tells you it's good to survive?
Isn't it? Like that's the whole point of being is to eat, survive and procreate. we've created a bunch of ancillary stuff afterwards because we don't have to like sit on a branch and worry about leopards eating us every 5 seconds. So we started to create language to keep track of things and to make stories, and with that we created a bunch of other stuff like.
Right, and I agree with that, and I do agree. Obviously, we both agree that for us, surviving is a good thing, right? What we don't agree on what makes that good to begin with, because I don't necessarily see survival. Let's say, for example, there are two different
why would a Christian see
societies.
survival is a good thing?
But to us is remember, we follow Jesus. John 16:4. Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. In our paradigm is we want eternal life, right? But we're only going to get the eternal life by following Christ on the next life.
Right, so you're only preparing this life for the next one. So why do you care about this life?
Why do I care about my next life or this life?
No, why do you care about this life if all this life is in preparation for the next one that's going to last forever? What is the meaning and point in this one except for like trying to shore up your ducks that are in a line to make sure that you said all the correct things and thought all the correct things at the right time, instead of actually like being correct or anything like that? It's all about just making sure that it's all okay, that you can go to heaven. Instead of actually caring about things because you think, hey, this is the only thing we have, so let's take care of each other because it's the only thing we have. Instead of, well, I have to pretend to take care of you and to make it look like I'm being righteous so I can go to heaven.
I want to apologize. I was getting a phone call and I missed half of what you said. It got off of like the speakerphone from my car because I'm in my car right now. It got off the speakerphone, so I'm really sorry. I don't know half of the things you said.
Indeed.
I don't know if you can repeat it shortly. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I know we talked about how.
Why do you care about this life when all of your life is in preparation for the next one, making sure that you only say the right things and you only do the right things, right? And meaning that you're only preparing for the next life. Then what does actually helping anything mean when you're not actually helping people? You're only making sure that you get your eternal life instead of actually caring to help people.
Well, then that's the part that's not
appearance of caring, isn't it? It's not really about caring. The caring is just a byproduct, and the helping is a byproduct. It's about the appearance of caring more than actually caring, right?
We're though that's not the reason why. So the reason why I care about it is because, and we're commanded to, right? In my view, is to share the good news with all people. We're trying to get everybody else in heaven, but we understand that not everybody wants it. I'm sorry,
but sharing the good news isn't caring. Caring is helping people.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's exactly what it is. In my view, that's exactly what I'm doing. So I'm helping them because I want eternal life for them as well. I mean, I understand that not everybody wants it. You know what I mean? I understand. That's what it says. Just
I want eternal life. I just don't see any truth in yours.
So so if you want eternal life, how would you go about it? Because in my way, the reason I care about this life, as you asked, is because I want eternal life. Right? That's why I care.
But
I want eternal life for everyone else.
Right, but like things don't, like the only thing that really lives forever is like a jellyfish.
Well, I don't know that, you know what I mean? That's what they say, but we don't know that for sure. We'll never live forever to do.
Every time it gets old, it becomes young again, and it lives forever.
That may most certainly be the case. It could be they could go, gets old, gets young, gets old, gets young for a finite amount of time that eventually dies. I don't know. We're not going to live forever to determine that, right?
Well, my point
but even then, it goes back to the same point, right? Like you said, that's why I care, and I still have to go back to, and I keep asking that question, is because this is what I have. This is one of the reasons why I'm not an atheist, right? I have a slew of reasons, and I ask this question every single time, and I never get a clear response. And I'll ask you this question: and we're all aware, right, that all of our worldviews, where none of us are exempt from it, that we all all our worldviews share an epistemology, metaphysic, and ethic, right? That we all use to be able to navigate life. That's what all our worldviews are made out of. It's inescapable. Now, on the unbeliever side is what is the ontology behind that epistemology, metaphysic, and ethic that makes your view, I guess, essentially true, rational, justifiable, accountable, and provide an intelligible view of life and reality? What would you consider as your ontology for that?
Well, we have a standard model. The standard model has many question marks on the edges of it, which are underdetermined and still to be explored, right? We know that it doesn't quite explain how the lowest level theory, the quantum theory, explains the phenomenon of gravity, for instance, right? And that's okay, because the first thing you brought up, right, the epistemology, I'm not sure that we do all have the same epistemology, right? It seems like there's a base that people can deny, but they basically have, which is just how they experience life in the normal human kind of like uninfluenced way, right? Like if you hadn't read any books or heard any theories and you just like woke up and like learned without words, more or less, for a while, and only learned like basic vocabulary, we find there's a commonality between almost all cultures. There's that. But the epistemology that we use now is very shaped by groups. And so what most people are doing is they're consciously or unconsciously sticking to what is the accepted thing within a tribe or a group of overlapping interrelated tribes. And that's where I think epistemology is struggling for people. So when
but that wouldn't be the ontology behind it, though, right?
I'm trying to get at something,
What
right?
makes-
Which is that the reason physics' ontology is the best is because it has the only guaranteed, reliable method of epistemology to arrive at it, right? So it
But
could
wouldn't
be the
that have-
case
wouldn't that
that if
follow-
I could have a dream, I could just in that dream be given a vision of the truth and the light, and it would be the truth and the light, and it would work. There's a really famous case of this where a Christian monk had a dream that the universe had planets that went around suns, that there were many different suns, and that the stars were all suns with other planets. And he said he saw this all in a dream. Now, he was put to death for that because he thought the church would be okay with him, and he came back to the church because he was a priest, and it turned out he was wrong. But the reason...
Well, and I get that, but the dream example is not really such a good example, right? Because I mean, even that dream itself assumes a lot of like logic behind it. It assumes an entire epistemology, metaphysics, and ethic already endowed in that person for him to have that dream to begin with.
The point is
So,
that look,
I mean,
he might have had a dream
ask the question.
he might have had a dream that might have been correct, kind of by luck or just by all the ideas that were floating around of different like views about the heliocentric model at the time. But it's not really a good epistemology. You wouldn't say, in general, since this guy got it right in this dream, we should arrive at our beliefs through dreams, right? We're going to rely on the evidence that like other people who had the heliocentric model used the same conclusion, but a totally different epistemology. So you can say we all see the same facts, right? But I'm going to rely on the system which reliably and provably really results in meta-optimal induction. Now, induction is not perfect, right? We will always admit that there's a problem with induction. Things are fallible, right? But despite the fact that everything in the past could be different from something in the future, the things in the past predicting the future is so reliable that we have to like go to special lengths to remind ourselves to look elsewhere, right? So things like critical rationalism, the idea of falsificationism, was like a very late improvement to the scientific method to say, let's still check, even the stuff that seems really right, let's still check it, right? And let's not say, because it's a bit of an overstatement, let's not say it's proven. Let's say it is unfalsified. And it has withstood falsification, and that's good epistemology. So I do not think the Bible has good epistemology. I think that the scientific worldview and the standard model is the best epistemology. And I don't know how to talk to someone about a faulty worldview other than to talk about the epistemology first. And the ontology is almost always a consequence of like what their epistemology is.
And that's really where our paradigms start. You know, this is where we differ, right? Because and you probably heard this many times, right? On my ontology is God, obviously, which grounds my epistemology, metaphysics, and ethic. And if that is the case, right? If everything that I assert, believe, think to be the case makes perfect sense. All of that makes perfect sense.
Are you like Are you a reformed epistemology precept?
I might be leading to that path, maybe. I couldn't say for sure. You know,
but that
makes a lot of sense.
Are you aware that precept is essentially just like affirming the consequent and is like hugely fallacious and is laughed at by every other form of Christianity?
Is it because, I mean, it becomes circular?
It's worse than circular. It's affirming the consequent.
But isn't that what every worldview does to begin with?
Not really, no. Look, every worldview has the same level of fallibilism. We agree on that part. At least we're on board with that part, right? I salute you for not.
Which worldview? But that's the question, because the way I see it is every worldview is essentially the same way. They're all circular at the end of the day.
No.
right?
So it's not
Which
circular.
world you which
Let me
world
put it
wouldn't
this
be
way.
circular
Let me put
as
it
a
this way.
foundation?
So suppose that you have some inductive empirical question, right? And
Uh-huh.
you have a piece of evidence at the start that leads you to explore something. And then you have a bunch of evidence that it leads you to, that eventually leads you to abandon or withdraw the original supposition that led you to it, the original hypothesis. But that hypothesis got you there, right? It's like a good guess, right? And you eventually learn so much that you cross out all of the crossword puzzle lines from the original belief, right? And the belief that you arrive at eventually is the one where every single line perfectly lines up with every other line, and the entire crossword puzzle is filled in. You have inductively solved that crossword puzzle. And like the standard model, it explains everything within it up to a certain point. The crossword puzzle doesn't cover the entire universe. It says this is the absolute best explanation for this much of the universe that we have evidence about. Would you say that
Yeah, but
is
that
the
even
meta-optimal way to solve a crossword puzzle?
not necessarily, because that's begging the question, right? Because the way that you're going about it, and which is a good, I'm not saying it's a bad system, it's actually really good, but that's not what I'm talking about really. What I'm talking about is what makes that system intelligible at that point, I guess, because you're assuming a lot of these things to be able to have a functioning system. There's a ton
You're
of
not
things that you're
refuting
assuming
my
already.
methodology. My methodology is that we do not just like rely on some circular, like, well, this means this, and that means that, and that means this. Oh, it's a circle.
No, and
What
its
we're doing
foundation, it would be
is
circular.
we're falsifying and eliminating things that contradict constantly, right? So with falsificationism and with what we would call found-herentism, look up Susan Hack, Haack. She's a great philosopher. She explains this stuff really well. What found-herentism does as a solution to the so-called Munchausen's trilemma or Agrippa's trilemma of infinitism or foundationalism or coherentism, like any mature actual epistemology, it doesn't just take one or the other and say that it is sufficient, right? You don't have one belief that just assures all others. Descartes was just dead wrong, in my opinion, that you can just say, think, therefore I am, and then everything else can follow from that, and that's your bedrock, right? Because there's huge parts of the world that are persuaded that the concept of the self and the I is very presumptuous and is very confused. So the I think doesn't start well when the first word in I think is probably confused at the very least, right? There's something like a self that is meaningful, but it's not exactly what we think it is. And so starting with the assumption that you know what I means is probably a mistake. So let's just admit that we're all going to have a flawed starting point, and we're all going to eliminate errors until we arrive at what seems like it is the absolutely non-contradicting, mutually checked and falsified and withstood falsification combination of all possible knowledge. That's the mature ontological picture, and it is arrived at by this crossword puzzle like epistemology.
But that stuff wouldn't be an actual ontology then, right? Because I mean it wouldn't be necessarily true. And if it's not necessarily true, then I guess all of our epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, none of it is true at all. And I guess we're starting back at square zero, and everything becomes meaningless, and we can just repeat that cycle over and over, where
Sounds
nothing
like
becomes
you're just
meaningful.
really scared of fallibilism, right? Fallibilism is
No,
fine.
it's just, I'm trying to
I can
understand
say
it because
I can say that I could be wrong, while being 99.999% I am not, and sleep fine at night.
Right.
But for some reason, some people get really disturbed by that, and then like want something like precept to tell them that they have some necessitarianism that is like guaranteed by its premise leading to its conclusion, even though the premise is the same as the conclusion.
I mean that's what that's what I'm saying is that at the very source, at its very foundation, every worldview is circular in that way. All of them. I think none of us can escape that.
Let me put it this
And my
way.
question-
Your worldview does nothing but maybe make you feel better. And you have to, and you grant that the entire scientific worldview, the way of arriving at truth by falsification and investigation and critical thinking and testing and so on, that is what produces results and understanding about everything we care about in the real world, other than this one topic that you believe somehow at the foundation, you just have to just tell yourself that there's no uncertainty because God did it, right? Is that
no, I believe that the entire everything you just said right now is really just contingent upon my worldview. I believe all that. I believe that the scientific method.
We could just pretend to grant that for the sake of being polite to you, and you could go on believing that your whole life, and it would be of no consequence, except for the part where you think that means that your entire religious text is an accurate and true portrayal of the world. Now, here's the biggest problem with precept. And talk to any precept and they'll admit that you should stay away from this question if you're going to debate people because you're going to lose. Or they'll say it in other words, like, oh, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. Darth will say, oh, like that's just like letting them win, right? If you are a believer in precept, you could still believe in 1001 infinitely generated possible religions, all of which are not the New Testament or the Old Testament, okay? So the problem is that there's absolutely no connective tissue between the belief in precept that a God must have done it to guarantee all of your certainty and the belief that any particular religion is the one true religion. For that, you need evidence, right? And evidentialism is where the Bible, as a specific religious tradition, falls apart. And you heard before, the guy could not defend historicity, and he wanted to change the subject to the etymology of the word worm, right? Because if we examine the archaeology, we find all the evidence says that the Exodus didn't happen, the conquest didn't happen, because all those cities were conquered before, and all the people lived there at the opposite times as the Exodus says they did. And if we examine the prophecies, we find tons of prophecies that are not just failed prophecies. They were written after the thing that they were claiming to predict that did come true happened. Like Daniel, where Daniel is believed by most Christian scholars who are studied on the subject to be a pious fraud, right? The person who wrote Daniel wanted to make a point to support the Hasmoneans and to criticize Antiochus and the Greeks. And it worked very well for that, so much so that the only mention of Daniel in any extra Daniel source is in Hasmonid texts. The Hasmonid propaganda that they wrote afterwards is all about how Daniel is true and we're the fulfillment of it, conveniently, right? The only reference you can find, I think, of anything that's like proto-Danielish is like in some obscure like quote by a figure that may have been like a Ethiopic priest or something like that is like claimed to be like a reference to it. But basically, there's no reference to Daniel prior to the Hasmoneans, which it is propaganda for. The whole story is about how Antiochus went into the temple and did Hellenic rites, which is a desecration, the abomination that brings desolation. And the idea that it's a Jesus prophecy is a completely retconned prophecy idea that would have been totally alien to people for hundreds of years.
Okay, and of course I'll ask that one question, obviously, because you give a lot of information. But I'll always ask that same question: is, well, how do you know what you believe is to be true? Given everything you just said, how do you know any of that is true?
I always assume that it could be false, and I always check as many sources as I have time and energy to do so to try to falsify what I believe. That's the answer. A fallibilist epistemology is one that maximally increases its chance of being true by meta-optimally engaging in induction and falsification, right? I would rather have the 99.999% chance of being right than the I don't like being uncomfortable with a 0.1% chance of being wrong, so I'm going to just believe something because it says that if it's true, then it's guaranteed to be true.
Okay, no, and I get that, right? I understand that, and I'm not disputing any of that stuff, right? I understand that's what you really want to believe. I obviously don't believe that. All right, I don't, and I'm not, and I have a different paradigm. You have a different paradigm. Obviously, with me, I believe truth to be grounded in the revelation of God. Obviously, you know that, I know that.
But the evidence is very strongly against it.
Okay, and see, that's the other thing I want to ask about. You saying how do you translate what the evidence is? How do you determine what is good evidence versus bad evidence? How do you even know what evidence is to begin with?
Yeah, you have to
how do you even know anything?
No, I'm sorry. How is this keep on getting turned around on us? Why is our evidence got to keep on getting put under all the scrutiny? You've got one piece of evidence that's the Bible, and you say that's justified by God, which justifies the Bible. So where is your evidence for any of it? Why do we got to keep on proving our evidence?
And that's the part where it's cringe, right, to me when people ask for the evidence, because we all have the same evidence. We just have different paradigms of how we translate that evidence.
You don't have the evidence, sir. You're not familiar
I'm sorry?
with it. You don't have the evidence.
Okay,
You're not
so my
familiar with
question to you, so that's why I asked, like, with me, obviously you probably heard about many people out there have these certain arguments, and I very strongly believe in the transcendental argument, right? That's kind of where it starts going to a little bit. I'm still kind of learning it a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
The precept.
So I'm kind of right, yeah, and that's why I said when you asked me if I'm a precept, well, I don't know yet, because I'm kind of leaning a little towards that way because I'm learning a little more and more as we go along. But listening to the tag argument, it's that in itself, it gives us grounding to believe anything. It becomes into like a metalogic discussion, right? It goes before evidence.
Why does the transcendental argument point towards your God?
Well, because only the Christian God can ground all the transcendental categories necessary for the intelligibility of logic and knowledge.
because he said
That's not
so.
true.
That is what. Well,
That's
then
just
what
what you
else?
said. Why is that
There's a
true?
basic problem. It's called the impossibility of the contrary. So
Right. That's what it's going
Bonson,
to. Correct.
yeah, Bonson claimed that he could prove the impossibility of the contrary, and that is somehow like
Yes.
overwhelming comparison of worldviews, or only the Christian one can do it, right? In actual practice, when you actually debate people, I could cite a bunch of debates where this has actually happened. It is impossible to prove the impossibility of the contrary. The impossibility of the contrary isn't really a well fleshed out argument. It's a rhetorical strategy to bully people, to make them think that the impossibility of the contrary has been established by just confusing them, right? In actual debates where people are familiar with it, they demolish it. I could cite, for example, Chum versus one of Darth's minions, I forget which one, where the guy comes in and Chum is like, look, I actually specialize in transcendental arguments. I'm really glad you brought a transcendental argument. Let me explain what transcendental arguments are, because I'm pretty sure you only know one of them and you don't know how they work in general. And I'm going to show you why the impossibility of the contrary is an unmeetable burden of proof. You cannot compare all possible worldviews. All you're going to do is try to bully someone out of the worldviews they're familiar with, and then confuse them into accepting that yours somehow is left standing. It's nothing like falsification.
Are you saying that there could be an infinite amount of worldviews, therefore you couldn't have an impossibility to the contrary because there's an infinite amount of worldviews?
Yes, there's no impossibility of the contrary because you cannot even establish what all the contraries are.
Because there would be an infinite amount of worldviews, correct? Is that I'm just trying to understand it simply.
For starters, that's a problem, yeah.
So, but this is where I see it, right? Because at its foundation, there isn't an infinite amount of worldviews. We all have a very limited amount of starting points to be able to begin.
Right.
There could be an infinite amount of worldviews, but at our starting points, that's all finite. I think there's very limited amounts of starting points, to be honest with you. And if you could destroy the starting point, you destroy the entire paradigm.
So you haven't destroyed anything when people have perfectly good worldviews that work well for them epistemologically. The only thing you're claiming is that yours, you're claiming that yours is the only one that is committed to the idea, and specifically your Reformed epistemology one, because other Christians are disgusted by this, right? Like if Darth has like a favorite writer that he's like a big fan of, that he likes to like talk to and like say that it's like an example of a brilliant Christian. The guy laughs at precept. When anyone else talks to him about precept, he just says, yeah, I think it's rubbish. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And Darth's like, oh, he didn't say it's not true. He just says he doesn't understand it. Ha ha ha. Like, Darth has to deal with the fact that all the books that he reads by other Christian scholars make fun of precept for the same reasons that anyone would, is that it commits logical howlers, right? Darth affirms the consequent when he tries to make his argument for God. Have you heard him do it? He'll do it like a dozen times. He'll double down on it.
I mean,
like this is not a valid form of argument, because it's not even a real argument. It's a rhetorical strategy to bully people or to reassure people who are scared. And you're in that category of someone who's scared, who doesn't like uncertainty, and who's scared that 99.99% certainty is not enough certainty. So what you want is someone to tell you that if you just assume the conclusion, then the conclusion is guaranteed because you assumed it.
Plus, aside from you were born in a time and a place, why should we're all born in a time and a place where it's predominantly Christian. Why should we care about your precept arguments? If somebody else, if anyone else makes it, why should we believe you over them? Aside from we're born in a time and a place.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I'm not gonna go and posit that you should believe it, right? What I think is, and that's why I asked that one question: that what is the ontology to rationalize and make actual and intelligible for your epistemology, metaphysics, and ethic that is not God? And that's why I always ask that question. That's really what I want to know.
Question. Very specifically, it is our brain that makes the world intelligible. I would even say we could go further: the operating system, the mind, the neurons. And that's what I would actually put in challenge to a God, which I would say, as argued before, I don't think is an actual explanation. I think it said that.
Right. Well, to me, and that's what I say when people, I've heard people use like the brain, right? And I mean, I can understand why people believe that. But then to me, I go further than that, right? Because I believe that, of course, all things were created by God, even the uniformity of nature, the laws of logic, laws of physics, all things physical and metaphysical, right? And all that predates the brain.
God, by the way.
I'm sorry?
None of those things point to your God, by the way. They can point to
any in my
God.
view,
the fact that a Christian is making the argument is the only reason why it seems to be a Christian argument.
Well, and that's why it goes into the also the tag argument starts coming into place with that, right? Because no other god has the necessary preconditions to be able to make intelligibility out of the external world outside of us, outside of our minds. And that's the
For
biggest
you,
question.
What?
I'm sorry?
Hinduism predicted the approximate age of the Earth within less than 1 billion years of the accurate number, and is the only religion to have done so. Hindus predicted the age of the Earth within 1 billion years of the correct number, and are the only religion to be able to do so. So anyone who's comparing, because remember I said there's two separate things. I could believe tag, I could believe precept. I could say, look, tag is true. Now, what religion is the truth of the world that has the most evidence for it being true, right? And I'm going to find in the prediction that the universe is has an Earth in it that has a certain age, and that age is billions of years. I'm going to find Hinduism wins the competition for just like which religion is likeliest true of all the religions, because it's the only one that makes a really hard to guess estimate of something that was way beyond the scientific and like sort of inquiry capabilities of people at the time. Now, you're going to say, yeah, but it doesn't like make the tag argument. Look, there are more versions of Hinduism than I can count. I grew up both with Christianity and going to a Vedanta temple and many other religions. Like I attended and participated in a lot of different religions, and every single one of them has a slightly different version. Many of them are monotheistic. Many of them have one, complete divine creator that is the unified and even divinely simple, essence of the universe, and everything is just sort of a dream within that being. So I'm going to be able to find a version of monotheism to my liking if I'm looking for a worldview for a religion that does predict things about the world that are hard to predict and that beats Christianity in that respect. You're not going to win the impossibility of the contrary argument. You're only going to cherry pick the one that you like because it makes you feel the best.
Well, no, and that's not why I'm doing it, right? Why I'm doing it is because the Christian God is the only one that has the attribute set to be able to make all these things intelligible and ground them all and ground all the transcendental arguments that we all use. That's
Are
why
you
I do
familiar
it.
with all the different versions of monotheism within Hinduism?
No.
Okay, so you can't make the argument for the impossibility of the contrary. And I can go on and on and on and say, are you familiar with this? Are you familiar with that? Did you know that Taco has
that's not
a presuppositional atheism? Taco, can you tell us about presuppositional atheism?
Kids, we don't even have to go there because, like I said, the Christian God already.
You're talking to one of the foremost experts.
Truth of our shared naturalistic atheism.
Can you do it without the voice?
Reality this is my voice, has been revealed to all of sound mind through both natural and special revelation in an undeniable way, right? I mean, you're
I do believe that, yes.
rejecting the truth in your unrighteousness because you want sin and evil to exist outside of a conceptual nature so you can pretend to be a main character in an imaginary cosmic battle of good versus evil. That's all you want.
I honestly have no idea what you're talking about, and I think the voice kind of threw me off a little bit. I didn't really quite understand. All I understood is being a main character and something about evil or something like that. I'm sorry. I didn't really understand anything you said.
What he's trying to say is that through natural and special revelation, it's been revealed to you that a God does not exist.
And I also can provide an argument. If we have knowledge, then the universal quantum field. We have knowledge, therefore the universal quantum field. So not only do we have the natural revelation, which is just like looking at the trees, bro. And then we also have the argumentation, which is the special revelation.
Okay, and then I'd have to ask you, what attributes set do these quantum fields have to be able to reveal this knowledge to you? And how do quantum fields come up with knowledge and ground it?
An unnecessary question. I mean, it has all the necessary attribute sets, but that's all irrelevant and unrelated because you can't even.
But it's not. But it wouldn't be, right? Because I'm asking you. So what attribute set? So that's what I'm asking for. What attribute sets do these quantum fields have to be able to
cover any of it?
Why not?
It's a necessary being. It provides necessary and sufficient conditions to account for everything in the universe.
And how do you know that?
Because it's a necessary being.
Right, but how would you know that this necessary being is communicating that with you, these quantum fields or whatever the case is? And again, what would be the attributes as it's a necessary being?
Special revelation. It's undeniable.
Look at the trees.
So let me just and I know you're just being making a little false argument. I'm good with it. I'm not taking
Joking my
offense to it.
ass right
He's
now?
totally serious. He has a whole
And I'm
YouTube
not
channel.
taking.
Are you fucking
Well, then-
joking my ass right now?
So, no, I'm sorry. Then if not, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not even taking offense to it. That's all I was trying to let you know. But I mean, judging by what you're saying, then
Trying
you're
to
just
figure
calling
out if
God a
he's
quantum
serious
field.
or
You're
not.
calling the triune God of Scripture a quantum field. Essentially, is what I'm hearing.
No, are you insane? The quantum field has no mind. You think that your necessary being is a god monster, but it can't
Okay.
be a god monster. Especially like a triune god monster could not be a necessary being because you could simply posit. Well, I'm positing the quantum field because that's the only thing that actually is possible. But if you were a theist, you could simply posit a Christian god that's not a Trinitarian god, and it's more likely the necessary being, and so your necessary being God would become redundant, and so it couldn't be a necessary being. So just with like a base level Christian God monster claim, you would literally have to change your entire position from necessary being to brute fact. So if you've ever, or you could also do infinite regress, but you probably wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, so now that you've encountered that, your position is that your God is a brute fact, right?
No, I mean, I have to ask you a question: is how did this mindless quantum
Do you
field
think that
God?
it can be multiple necessary beings or something?
I don't know.
So
Absolutely not. I think it'd be incoherent if we had
because
multiple
there
necessary.
can only be one, just
Right.
positing a Christian God monster that's not a triune God, you've fallen into a pit of sorrow.
I don't understand how. So you're calling the necessary being a non-triune God, which that would make things a little bit incoherent because then he wouldn't be perfect in
I'm
his
just
nature.
doing another
that's not
way
my-
of God, the Christian God
Right,
that's
I
not
know.
triune, right?
I know, and that's why what I'm understanding is this God that you're positing would not be coherent to be able to be the creator and
No,
satisfies all
it
the
would
necessary
it
conditions.
would be according to how you guys view it, right? That's
No.
what I'm saying.
No, and then it wouldn't be. That God that you just made up, this doesn't make sense because first off,
Well,
he
it's
just said he's
the
going to try him.
Christian God. Hang on.
I'm sorry, what was that?
He's looking something up. And then, Taco, when you're done, I just want to ask him a question.
You go until Taco gets back.
Well, I will continue to press that our brain, as it absorbs information, is making things intelligible. It really doesn't come from the senses. It's coming from the neurons themselves really reacting to it. I think that is a way more plausible explanation than some sort of outside force, because most of life doesn't care about intelligibility. Plants
So
doing just fine. I'll hand it back over to Taco, but I still continue to say brains, way better
So-
option.
yeah, sorry about that. Kid needed help with something, but with that, with what we were talking about, so a necessary being is going to be unable to be redundant, right? And so because it would have to exist in all possible worlds, it would have to account for everything. And there's a couple other things people will apply to it. Sorry about that. There's a couple of things that people would apply to it depending on their philosophical positions on it, right? But for the most part, it's like has to exist in all possible worlds, right? And so most of what people apply to it is not going to allow it to be redundant. Actually, it would has to exist in all possible worlds. There's I
think you're cutting off. I'm sorry, you cut off. I think.
How to say what I'm trying to say. So, I've been out of this for like a month, but all I was getting at is that a Christian God monster that isn't a triune God claim, that accounts for everything in the universe and has to exist in all possible worlds, which is pretty much the same thing that you're claiming, except it lacks a triune nature, would make your God claim redundant.
Well, and it wouldn't. I mean, because being triune would be a necessary requirement, a necessary attribute for this perfect God.
Why?
That's insane.
Well, the reason why, in my view, is because a perfect God in our worldview, right, has to be perfect in all his attributes, and that includes his communionship and his love. And that can only be perfect through an actualization by sharing that love with separate people or separate entities, and with God being triune, his love and communionship is shared perfectly.
And
If it's a Unitarian God,
it's totally not a thing that was made up in the Council of Nicaea.
The fun thing is that the Hindus also have the avatar of the divine creator that comes down to earth. That is like the central figure in the Gitas, and their text also has a Messiah-like figure that teaches them important truths and is like the basis of their epistemology. So it's like you can cherry pick and say, yeah, but it lacks this or it lacks that. They're going to say the exact thing back to you. They're going to say the exact same thing back to you and say why yours is flawed and why their epistemology is the best. And guess what? There are dozens of schools of thought within Hinduism that each have a different argument why the other one's epistemology is flawed. There is many religious epistemologies as there are religious points of view, and every one of them slightly disagrees, and that's why they draw the conclusions they do, right? But you're not going to be able to prove that Tag guarantees that the Christian epistemology is the only one that goes with the transcendental argument, because there's a transcendental argument for almost every monotheistic religion. And there's a transcendental argument for quantum fields, which Taco just explained to you, right? Transcendental arguments don't automatically lead to a triune God. They just lead to some necessary being, and you can satisfy it with all kinds of necessary things.
Quantum field.
So it does not work as an argument. Christians do not use this argument. It is laughed at.
Does
Go and look.
Work. What?
No, I'm talking about for Christianity. I'm saying as an argument for Christianity. Yeah. Look at Christians know that this argument doesn't get you to Christianity, so they don't use it. And if you go to any school of divinities or any theology professor or any apologist who's not in the like 5 to 10 people that still think Darth Dawkins is funny, then those people will tell you why this is a bad way to argue for Christianity. And it only appeals to people that are terrified of uncertainty and that are just so scared of the problem of induction and the idea of only being 99.999% sure or having 99.999% awareness or knowledge of a topic. The idea that being underdetermined means that there could be 2 or 3 theories at once that both might be correct, but we have really strong evidence that it's probably one of those 2 or 3 theories. And we ruled out pretty much all the others, but those 2 or 3. That scares people. And so they cling to, I need a theory that just guarantees absolute certainty.
Yeah, and see with me, and I'll say first off, I'm not scared. I am very open-minded. Right? There's not a dang thing in this world that scares me. I'll tell you that. But second, let's go. See, the reason with me is that
because of the afterlife? Like, what do you mean by you're not scared of anything? That seems like a weird statement. I want an explanation for that.
I mean, I'm not going to say anything. There's a few things I'm scared of. Obviously, it's losing my children.
I'll say what I'm scared of. I have no problem saying I'm scared of stuff. Like, why? It's weird to say you're not scared of anything.
I'm not. I'm scared to lose my children. Aside from that, my family. Aside from that, nothing else scares me. I've been through a lot of things I don't want to talk about. Due to my career choice, obviously, I guess you guys can guess what that is. But I've been through it all and probably seen it all already. Where it's really not. It doesn't scare me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Aside from losing family, nothing else scares me.
Well, can I? And it's a segue, but I want to actually highlight something because I think that people are on the edge of whether they should or should not believe. I think the problem of evil is extremely powerful. To go back to that for a second, I wanted to ask you, because you asked us back what makes something evil, what makes something good. I think there are good arguments for both objective, subjective, all types of moralities. I think it only can come from atheist circles. I'll tell you why. And I'll ask a question at the end of this. I believe that the type of monotheistic omni-God has a very specific morality. And it is very specifically might makes right. I know I'm all powerful. I created you, and I could torture you. What exactly makes something moral in your worldview?
See, in my thing, and that's a good question, right? And when you said might makes right, and that's a very good question because I strongly do believe that. When I say might makes right,
see.
might is what makes right, right? And like I always said, unfortunately for us, that which is the mightiest is righteous, right? That's always
We can
responsible
give
for that.
arguments for why it's
But
not
then,
righteous if we have jurisprudence and we
Exactly.
examine different lines of evidence.
all right,
Right does not make right.
and we'll go with that right now in a bit. But then you ask me, what makes something good as opposed to what makes something evil, in my view?
Well, two things. I want to just, in a moment after this, I really want to press back, just like Ix was saying. Not only does I think that might doesn't make right, I think often by allowing that morality, you're going to have horrible people who are going to be very strong and powerful. And let me tell you, I don't want to label them. I wouldn't sleep well at night labeling someone who came in, slaughtered a bunch of people. However, they did win technically. Does that logic? I don't understand how that could scale to an omnipotent level. And he did do that. I mean, God drowned babies.
The fact that he killed people is so. Let me just understand it. Just I want to simplify it.
Sure.
Because God killed, or because God ended the life of people, therefore God couldn't exist.
Not that he couldn't exist, but because God killed innocent people who didn't deserve to die, he is an immoral person, and we shouldn't be looking to them for moral guidance. I've had theists come to me who have said, look, I believe in a God. It's just God is evil. I don't know what to tell you, or he's just neutral and doesn't care, so he does evil and good things. But I am extremely conflicted when you tell me, and maybe you didn't say it in so many words, but God is good. Goodness comes from God.
Yes.
I struggle with that because from someone who, oh, and I just noticed I feel bad. Ix snuck out. Thank you so much, Ix. Fucking amazing host. And so I struggle with understanding how this guy could be good when I think I could bring up numerous scenarios in which I would say to I don't want to say average folks, but to people who don't believe in the religion would view it as horrible, cruel.
Okay. So I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak on how I see things. Okay, why I don't see that as a problem as far as God drowning the world, and maybe there was innocent people, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. I can't see into the past.
Oh,
but we'll
can
say
I
that there
pause
was.
you a second? Come on. Were
Sure.
there babies on Earth?
Yeah, more than likely. That's what I'm going to go with. What you're saying, right? I am going to go with that. I am going to accept those terms for this rebuttal.
All right,
So yes, we're going to go with that. Okay. Yeah. So God ending the life of babies, in my view, does not make it evil at all. First off, because, well, first you have to give me a standard of what is good that is not God, right? And second, who's to say that these babies, in my view, are going to suffer eternal damnation instead of going up in heaven and living a living in paradise?
Oh,
I mean,
can
I don't know that. And then apart from
Can I
that,
pause you for a second?
well, and then I'll finish one more thing.
Go continue. I'm sorry. Finish.
I'm sorry. Yeah, because I let y'all speak. I'm really respectful with that because I'm really
excited. You're good.
And second is we don't know the future, right? God does know the future. Because someone was born a baby, we don't know if this person would have been the next Hitler for all we know. You know what I mean? Or the next Thanos. No, that's the thing is we don't know the future, but that's the power that
If
we.
one baby turns into Hitler, how many babies have to die before it's unjustifiable? Come on, really?
The most
That's I'm letting you know that's what my view.
God is the standard of good. So
Correct.
He doesn't have a coherent definition of good.
Do you have one?
Do you want me to pull up a dictionary? I can pull up some standard definitions.
Dictionary, that's really not going to matter. Those definitions change all the time.
To be desired or approved of, have in the qualities required for a particular, so it's something you would like, right? That which is morally righteous. Here's what we're looking for: that which is morally righteousness, right? Just morally right. You're saying that God is morally right, but it's like a standard. But God's doing all sorts of crazy shit, taking out all the kids. Like, I don't see how that could fall in line with anything righteous.
Well, I'm asking you then.
You're
What?
saying that the God is a standard. So what are you going up against that with? You go
Right,
up against that with the people that exist.
Okay, so that's why provide me a standard. I want to hear one.
Well,
Provide me a standard. That's what I want to hear. Like, provide.
Morality
I'm
is
really
between
interested.
agents, right?
Well. Like I said, I'm
morality
interested.
Do something to do on your own behind closed doors.
I don't.
well,
I'm not understanding exactly what.
Could I just put forward that I will give you a standard in a moment, and I think
Sure.
we can have a good conversation about it. But what I want to just highlight, you said that maybe the babies will go to heaven. I will reject this argument, and I'll tell you why you'll reject it. Wouldn't that make it the fastest way to get to heaven, and thus abortions are truly doing the Lord's work because they are going straight to heaven, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, in that sense, correct.
Plus, I mean,
Isn't
was it
that-
Leviticus that says, you know, if you think that the woman's cheated, you can kill the baby with the pot trial of the bit of drink? So, you know,
That's true. You could.
Well, let's do one at a time. It's like you said, it's killing the baby. He's going to go automatically go to heaven, and you're doing the Lord's work. Well, no, really. I mean, because the baby's going to heaven, but what about the lady having the abortion?
I mean,
You know what I mean?
A sacrifice like Jesus himself.
Right. But that's the baby's not sacrificing himself. The woman's sacrificing the baby. I mean, I understand the baby.
She's sacrificing
herself to eternal damnation for the baby to exist in heaven forever.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, then isn't it? Then it's still a good act of sacrifice, isn't it? Because she's sacrificing her eternity in heaven for an eternity in hell, so a baby can
What's
have
the
an
moral
eternity in
character
heaven.
of a person?
That doesn't make any sense. That really wouldn't make sense.
So when Jesus dies for people's sins, that makes sense, right?
Well, it's a Jesus died for the entire world to open the veil and give us passage back into the Father.
That
Correct?
makes more sense. That makes more sense, right?
Jesus sacrificed himself. Yeah, it makes more sense to sacrifice yourself as opposed to sacrifice someone else.
I hate to get real.
She's not sacrificing the baby. What do you want about?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The woman is sacrificing herself. She's not sacrificing the baby. She's sending it to heaven.
But she's sending the baby to heaven, not herself. She's not killing herself.
Yeah, no, she's sacrificing herself so the baby can go to heaven, isn't she? Just like Jesus sacrificed himself for everyone else.
Yeah, but it's not even necessary to sacrifice yourself to get the baby. That's like the logic that doesn't make any sense to me. It's just like, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to go. It's you're saying, I want to go to hell. I want to go to hell because I want to send my baby to heaven. It's just
Jesus
like, well, no, you don't have to
send everyone to heaven.
It's like, Mom, you don't have to go to hell. You can both go to heaven. You know what I mean?
Paul, do you understand? This is what we bring up. We always say that God could just forgive everybody. Hey, can I ask, after Jesus sacrificed himself, where did he spend those 3 days?
Yeah. Well, in hell.
I mean, I said I don't mean to get this real with you, but you said you had kids. Wouldn't you make a sacrifice if you knew that you could get your children into heaven? Because they could go to damnation.
Well, I mean, that's a strange question. Me sacrificing myself for my children. I mean, yes, I'd sacrifice myself. And what I mean by that, I mean my life. Would I die for them? Absolutely. But I don't know where we're getting with that.
Well,
it's not like it's my preference and I want to. I mean, if I had to, yes.
I think sacrificial logic, when it becomes literal, becomes disgusting. I love that you want to sacrifice for your children. I like that you want to protect for them. That probably means you're a good father. However, what we're trying to highlight is you have this confusion. Why would I want to sacrifice myself? So, because this is the Christian story. You're saying it just happened on a worldwide scale. I would push back and say, why is God doing any of this to begin with? All God needs to do is say, look, you guys had this original sin. Yeah, I forgive you. Done.
Ah, okay, I see it. I understand now. So you're saying, why does God need to sacrifice himself with all his power that he has? He can just forgive everyone.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, unless there's some sort of built-in contradiction, I think if you're all powerful, then you're making the rules.
Yeah, no, right, and
I
that
don't
would make
think. Wait, 1 second, Paul. I don't think that's exactly even what Amy was saying though, because like,
okay,
because if okay, and so here's sort of what I wanted to ask. Not exactly, but like, okay,
sure.
even if you're, if you're a mere Amy, and also shout out, great debate on MDD the other day, Amy. But like, if my choices are to look around and not like what I see, I'm very angry, or I like there's no way this can be right, and so I have to figure it out or figure something else out. And my choice is either to say, well, God is the substance that I'm solving into or I'm solving about, or I can say, well, there's other evidence. So Paul, there could be other evidence that I can use. Why wouldn't I look, me or Amy look towards other evidence, other communities, other ways of approaching a problem? Like, isn't that a fair question that like an atheist could ask?
I'm sorry. I didn't quite grasp all of it you were saying. You're saying a lot. I mean, you can just keep it short because I'm trying to focus on her original question, and I'm kind of caught between two because I was trying to answer one, but then you posited a different question, and now I'm kind of confusing both.
I felt that you like slightly pigeonholed the question into this question about God as this almost metaphysical substance responsible for the good, right? God is the thing that makes good, right? And so if we agree that there's maybe a good or something, why would I choose to pigeonhole myself in this community or something versus I'd rather talk to Ember, or I'd rather talk to Amy, or I'd rather talk to Taco. Like these are people that I know think about the good already. So to me, that's already more useful. There's nothing useful in theism.
So it's telling me that it's grounding the goodness in Taco or your friends is better than grounding it in God.
It's grounding the pursuit, right? Right. I would absolutely say that talking to Taco would be better than reading the Bible.
Well, I mean, I don't think, and I'm sorry, I'm not grasping all your names, and you ask a totally different question from, what was your name? I think it was Amy, I believe.
You're thinking of Duck McDuck stuff. That's Duck McDuck stuff. You were talking to Amy before.
Okay, Amy, all right, because that's what I'm saying, because there's two very different questions, so I don't know which question you guys want me to answer first. And I don't want to show her any
whatever your heart feels. Whatever your heart feels. I think we're in the sweet spot.
Okay, so we'll go with yours, right? So you're talking about talking with Taco and them being a better standard of good than God himself. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say that's plausible and it's worth considering.
But that wouldn't even be any justification or grounding for good to begin with. That's just kind of communicating. That's a weird question for me to understand. It's like, how do you ground goodness in something unjustifiable through just communication? That's kind of weird to me. I don't know if you guys see what I'm trying to say.
Is one of the greatest things that humanity ever made. Written and spoken language is what the greatest thing we ever made. What do you want about? Like the whole thing of coming up with ideas and getting different schools of thought on this completely comes because we made different forms of communication. Because like we'd already spread out from Africa. You're forgetting what I said before, that this is all just naturalistic things because we used to be tribalistic in nature. So we just feel like there's these moral arts and stuff. And then you put God onto it and we put other things onto it, forgetting that once upon a time when in the jungles and in the savannas and the swamps, we thought very differently and did different things. We're just carrying on those thoughts because we haven't moved on very far, evolutionarily, right? So society is quick, evolution is slow. And we teach ourselves out of these animalistic ways into the ways that we've made up ourselves throughout the years. Like, that's the whole point of childhood.
I'm very sorry. And I'm very sorry. You like, then again, you spoke a lot, right? You said a lot. Now I'm dealing with three different questions. Now you guys are like, kind of like, you know what I mean? dogpiling me. So let me just go with one at a time. Let me just address one thing first before is in going by based off what you said. Communication is a great thing, right? Inventing language, so on and so forth, amazing, right? But that doesn't mean it's good. You know, there's bad language that we create out there. That doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with what is good or bad creating language. So that's where I'm a little confused with the first question, right? So it's just like that doesn't mean anything.
So look, when you
Language
say that
itself
something's
doesn't-
unjustified, I assume you're referring back to the epistemology stuff. You're saying that like only certain
Correct. Yes.
necessary things
Correct.
are justified because you're trying to claim that that's the only standard justification that you use, right? But I can show you lots of examples that you'll grant where you consider many things to be justified enough, despite the fact
And we'll
that they're
get to
not,
that.
they're not
And we'll
necessary
get to that.
things.
And we'll get
right?
to that. But let's show Amy. I think Amy's still there. I don't know if you still want that question answered, Amy, or not. I mean, that's because there's so many things, and I want to show you the respect that you deserve.
Do it
But
do
if
it
you
charitably
say
though,
stuff and then we
because
respond
sorry,
to it,
Paul,
and then
Paul,
you deflect.
One second, please. Paul, do it charitably though, because if you say, well, Amy's just creating language, you're also not taking the
No,
totality
I'm not.
of what Amy says. You're
trying to
saying
answer
that
everyone.
you're saying
I'm
that
trying to
she
answer
would have
everyone.
to look to the Bible. Like that's that. I just want to avoid that red herring that we're gonna just go back to the Bible.
I'm not going to address the Bible at one bit. Okay, I'm not even going to use that. But so going with what Amy says, first off is hey man, see, I already lost myself where the question was as far as like, I mean, Amy, if you're still there, if you want to re-ask the question as far as like,
Well,
you know,
I'll just do kind of reiterate how we got there. It's just that I think that the God of the Bible does horrible things, and I see the believers often make excuses. Yes, it's true, he drowned a baby, but the baby got a fast track to heaven. I would say,
Right, okay.
well, if we apply this logic, you know, a variety of situations which I think you would think are abhorrent, things like abortion, would become, again, right, they'd get straight to heaven. And so you would almost have this moral guidance to say, well, listen, you may want to go to heaven. Sure. That's, you know, as a religious person or as a Christian. However, what would be even better than you getting into heaven? Having a guarantee that your children are going to get into heaven, or your wife who is pregnant. It could lead to horrible things, murdering your children, forcing an abortion on a woman who didn't want all of these, because it would end up being this ends justify the means things. Sure, I'm going to roast in hell forever, but don't you know, my children, my wife, ignore the bloody scene around me, they went straight to heaven.
Mm-hmm. Now with that, right, why that doesn't make sense in our view is because, yeah, I mean, you're right. If you want to give someone, you know, you can send someone straight to heaven, like babies having abortions, send them straight to heaven. That's absolutely, yeah, the guaranteed way to go to heaven. All right, but what evil did you just commit by killing the baby, right? You took away his ability to choose, his free will. You know, all that was
that is
we also took his ability to suffer away because he goes straight to heaven. He can never suffer in his entire existence.
Right. So how do you reconcile giving them free will and giving them heaven at the same time?
But Paul, hold on one second. Like, very specifically, this is the problem. I could just turn it exactly around. Do you know what God did when he drowned those babies? He ruined their free will. He could have allowed them to go out. And you even brought out, how do you know it was a Hitler? Or maybe he killed a baby Hitler, but he probably killed, you know, lots of Anne Franks and lots of others that would just be
right.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Paul, you're not going to like this. You're not going to like this, but there's not a merit badge because Christianity says, "Oh, we don't have we don't support abortions. Men don't have abortions." You know, I don't see an Eagle Scout coming out of this. So I agree with Amy more on this one. That like okay, one thing that I do know is that you know, having this one sort of moral fallback doesn't somehow make God the source of morality or anything like that.
Okay, so then I ask the same question, right? So if God is not the source of morality to you, he is to me, then what is the source of morality then?
I mean,
how do you justify it around?
twice and you've not
I
approached
don't
it.
know. Yeah, talk to homies on stage or whatever, right? Go to the Senpai VC.
But that's
I
that's
would
an honest
say
question.
that we have many ways, secular ways of either grounding morality or talking about morality where you don't need a god. It seems to be that morality is the set of laws and reactions to social situations. So, for example, I would argue if you have one person on an island, that morality doesn't exist, and it's not until you get two people or more that you really have these social situations. I would argue, as a situationalist, everyone has a fancy title. I would just say you really have to look at the situation. You have to look at different metrics. Is this being empathetic? Is this being kind? Is this being fair? A lot of these are going to seem like subjective metrics. However, I would say they are the best way that we're trying to claw a morality together. And I think we've actually gotten better at it as the years have gone by. This is why the moral systems of heyday are worse than, I would say, the moral systems of now, and we'll know things better in the future. Your children's morality, I would argue, hopefully, is going to be better. There's many different ways. I would say the problem with asking for one standard is because I believe that you truly start asking where morality comes from when you are in an atheist circle, because no atheist seems to have a complete agreement. You could be an atheist and you can have an objective morality, you can have a subjective morality, and I still think all of these are conversations you can only have when you agree that it's not coming from some sort of mind. I have so many problems with this consciousness that is outside time and space, and morality coming from there.
Which makes it subjective because it's just subject to
exactly. I mean, I think that, in fact, if I may say, because theists will often, especially Christians, Muslims, they'll say that it is an objective God. I would actually argue that it's the worst of both worlds. It is a subjective being who is forcing its will to say that it is objective. You better say it's subjective, or I'll burn you.
Can I hop in? Because I slightly disagree as an atheist. So I don't picture a world where I think of, someone who's 14 years old and should be in school is actually making t-shirts for me to buy at Target. That doesn't seem like an ethical or just thing, and it doesn't seem conceivably ethically or just. It doesn't seem conceivable or just that a mother and father who only want to spend time with their kids when they're trying to get into a gifted program have to work 3 or 4 jobs. That's not something I'd ever see as just. And this only gets worse, I think, when you start asking about violence against women and children, or endorsing violence from anyone in any sort of society. And so saying that everything has to be this sort of stance-dependent, subjective, we even created a subjective God. I am even more charitable towards monotheism as an atheist, because I think that there is an appeal to this idea that some ideas we just cannot simply shake.
Can you guys still hear me?
Well, yeah, I would say that we can.
Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Shake God.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm having issues with my phone here. Just shut off my car, and I'm like, I can't even put in a speaker, and I can't get back to it. So I'm sorry if I'm losing everything. I don't have no idea what you guys are talking about at this point. It's just because can't hear anything, and I'm on my phone now, and I'm just trying to listen in and trying to fix this.
Welcome back.
Your audio sounds good. Sorry.
But I would say, as I don't believe in a morality that's fully subjective. I'm somewhere in between, as an empiricist and a subjectivist. I think it has elements of both. But what was the other part of the question?
Well, it was an objection. It wasn't a question.
Okay,
So
well,
from my
objection.
perspective, from my perspective, I don't,
You said you like
it would
objective
seem like
morality and you
it would
like the
seem like
Bible attempt
yeah,
to
I've got,
sound objective, even if it's not actually
yeah,
objective.
I've got another 40 or 50 miles to go when there's particulars about morality in the world, that I don't see a way someone could justify. I wouldn't understand how it's justifiable, and that's what I think separates secular worldviews from theistic worldviews. Is I don't have to give up on something. I don't have to go for those little ticky tack wins. I can go for the problems that I think humans want to solve and are relevant for the most people. Kind of that greatest good sort of principle.
Sure. I was just saying that I think that it only starts with atheism. I think if you're granting morality to a god, that we can't really gain much in terms of what morality is.
Fine. Yeah.
So here's the thing though. The idea that theism is inseparable from like a moral code that is divine command theory and potentially even metaphysical divine command theory, which is the super silly version, is very uncommon, right? So it's actually common for a belief in a divine being to have a separate set of justifications as the justifications for ethical behavior, right? The idea that divine being like gives the exact code of laws and it all flows from that and it's all just his commands is not universal at all. And there's lots of Christians who don't think it works that way, right? So you can be any kind of theist you like and still understand morality to be complex and to require like something like jurisprudence. And you can acknowledge the fact that we have what is essentially a satisficing, which basically means multiple solutions that are relatively acceptable that we would all group and say those are decent or acceptable. We can live with those. Those are all moral solutions because they involve correct moral reasoning to a conclusion that is more or less agreeable to all concerned by it. We can say that whole group is all moral, even though there's not one single set of prescriptions that's the same across all three of them, but they're all pretty good, right? So I don't think anyone who thinks they believe in objective morality can actually defend the position that there's only one way to handle a thing and that everyone's going to agree to that. What they're actually going to be faced with is a number of situations where there's like 3, 4, 5 pretty good solutions to a problem, all of which are slightly different responses to that problem. The stuff that we all like think we agree on is the most extreme examples, like don't torture people and stuff like that, right? But you're still going to have lots of complexity and edge cases and variations in, well, how should we not torture people, right? So it makes way more sense, even if you're a theist, even if you believe that God can give a command and God is divine, that morality is not just divine command theory, right? Like there are normative divine command theorists who think God gave commands and they're the best commands available, so we should follow them, but that it is not just definitional that any command God gives is what it means to be good. Because the problem with divine command theory metaethics, for instance, there's many problems. The most basic one is that an evil God can give you evil commands, and they're definitionally good, so good can be evil. Good cannot be evil, therefore divine command metaethics is false.
Yeah, but nine. There's one problem I see with this. Okay, and that's a great argument, but one of sorry, I sound like frickin' Noam Chomsky because my voice is all cracking right now. But so a problem I understand with this divine command and something is there's always these fallbacks like well, oh, there's original sin and yeah, God was created. Like a baby is created in God's image, but then you get in the world and there's all of a sudden there's original sin. And so like if I'm thinking about where I can actually go out and walk from this place where I'm born, I become a horrible person. This is sort of the thing that I'm trying to solve for morally. And like where do I go look? Do I go look at particles? Do I go find the diner at the end of the universe and God's just sitting there? Do I open up this book, the Bible? None of those seem like as good of a solution as identifying what are the things that we actually find moral as people and what is the underlying reason or psychology that, like, for example, I love animals. Not like
You're not arguing
not
for divine command theory. You're arguing for
I'm not saying
something
that
like
animals.
a secular.
Well, I'm not saying that animals are deontological.
It sounds like you're arguing for moral naturalism, and moral naturalism is a very interesting set of positions. I think there's some reasonable versions of it. What I'm saying is that if you are a theist, you ought not hold the divine command meta ethic, and most sound, like, informed, educated Christians don't, because it actually doesn't make any sense, right? Now, I'm not saying all objective morality concepts don't make any sense. It really depends on how you define the terms. So you can make a version of objective morality that works, but you have to redefine a lot of the terms to mean something different than people mean in, like, everyday language. And that's okay, and it might be a sound way of going about it. I think the problem is assuming the way that people use terms in everyday common language. Is it true that there is one and only one prescription that is the true and correct prescription for any given moral situation? I don't think anyone can defend that. Because there's a group of them, right? You can say these are the criteria that make something acceptable, and here are some satisfying moral prescriptions that all seem to be in that ballpark, and that they wouldn't, like, have a problem with each other, even though they're slightly different, right? That's how it actually works.
So I understand this. The reason that doesn't really sit cogently with me is because you're asking me to put stance dependence as truth because it is propositional, right? And not to get too, like, philosophical, but me writing down what I think is moral and then being able to attribute that back to a moral stance or someone's personal ethics or some shit like that, whatever. Like, that to me isn't exactly what moral or ethics actually means to correspond with reality. And so that's why I brought up my sort of main thing is, like, well, I'm not totally sold on moral subjectivity, and in some senses I actually have more in common with theists or something than that stuff.
Are you familiar with constructivism? So, like, the basic constructivist position is that there's not a single prescription that is the prescription, because we can just show evidence that that's not the case. But what there are
no, you can't.
procedures. Well, we can show that there are procedures that people follow that they consider to be moral reasoning, and there are procedures that people follow to be more, like, capricious, selfish, immoral reasoning. And
yeah, that's right. And so after I get my Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, and I go out and do meta philosophy, of course, I can attribute that back to that person, doing whatever, right? Okay, so like, yeah, Duck's not perfect. No person is perfect, but like, do you kind of get what I'm saying?
I'm not sure I do, and I have to leave in, like, 2 minutes. But all I'm trying to say is, I'd be interested to hear later when we can talk more what you think of constructivism, because its position is that there is an objectively sound kind of moral reasoning, and it's the use of the correct kind of moral reasoning that leads to conclusions that people find acceptable, rather than the idea that there is just one solution for all time that's like an immortal perfect morality, right? And I think that's a fairly reasonable position. I like Blackburn's quasi-realism, which just says the reason people like moral realism and the idea that there are moral solutions is because there do seem to be criteria by which things seem to be, like, good and bad morals, and it's hard to put our foot on it. But
that's a different conversation, though. This is a different conversation, because what you're saying to me sounds more like neuropsychology, and maybe I'm messing this up, but that doesn't sound like it's an actual argument for moral realism.
No, this doesn't rely on neuroscience. I think there's good neuroscience arguments for, like, moral naturalism as well, but I think that the way that everyday people use morality is a combination of constructivism and quasi-realism. It's not like some perfect, like, purified position.
Yeah, but I don't know what that means. I'm not that smart.
We don't follow a single meta ethic in everyday talk. No one on the everyday basis knows what meta ethics are or really knows about them in any depth. They'll say objective or subjective, but they don't really know much. What they do know is that there are people who are reasoning to the best of their ability in a moral way to try to find what seems like the most moral prescription, and there are people that are not. And the answers that the people who are trying their very best and that appear to be applying the best methods use seem to lead to acceptable answers, and when people don't do that, it seems to lead to bad answers. And that's like the most first criterion before you get to a moral answer is that you're actually attempting to do moral reasoning or not.
But I would just say,
And-
this is just a product of cognition. Sorry, that's all I wanted to throw in. Sorry, Amy.
No, you're fine. I enjoy the conversation, but just like Ix was saying a moment ago, I probably have to leave in like a half an hour or something.
Yeah, I gotta go.
So we are gonna invite Little Buddha onto the stage.
Oh,
It was
I
fun
need to get
talking.
going
I
too,
gotta take off.
actually,
Oh,
but
you got to
if
get
wanna
going.
talk
Should
to-
we close?
If you want to talk to more people, you can talk to more
No,
people.
I have to really. I feel bad, little Buddha. If we're gonna have an out, we'll close up. But it has been 3 hours.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
Cheers,
this
everyone.
was fun, everybody. We're going to go ahead
Yeah.
and close down now. It's been a fun 3 hours. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out and having a good
So-
conversation. We were not convinced of any gods. Make sure that you follow Amy and Shaken Fist on YouTube. Amy is linked in the Discord and should be linked on the page. If not, I'll have to fix that. But anyways,
Thanks,
you
Taco.
all have a wonderful Sunday afternoon, and we will see you probably the first week of next month, unless there's extenuating circumstances again.
Cheers.
Have a good one,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Have fun seeking truth.
Be kind to each other.
Taco.
All right, y'all. I felt bad. I probably should have talked to that person, but I also promised my partner in the femboy to play Baldur's Gate 3. So many different priorities in life, but it was actually a fun stream. The each one of those went for long. I think the last guy was 96 minutes, an hour and a half, and he cut off a little bit at the end. Felt bad for him on the phone. Was nice. Had someone in there complimenting for the debate. Go check out the debate on Modern Day Debate. I am trying to think what else is on the mind besides Apostate Prophet. Oh my goodness. Apostate Prophet. I just saw Joe Rogan just said that Jesus Christ's resurrection more likely than the Big Bang. Oh my goodness. Boys and girls, I think I really do need to start streaming more because we're losing atheists and to con artists. Listen, David Wood's not a con artist. He believes for whatever. He's a sociopath, a psychopath. I'm trying to remember. And, you know, I'm glad that he believes instead of, you know, hurting people. But we really need better reasons to believe in a God. And I don't think we heard any today, you know, the little back and forth, but still waiting. Justin, yep. Listen, we need to peacefully make them agree with us via the sword. The religion special. All right. Kitty wants in, Kitty wants out. I think we're going to wrap up there, though. Go check out. We did an after show last night about the topic. I should contact James. I really want to do more religious debates. I mean, I'm starting to get a knack for the LGBTQ. I feel like I resisted going into, you know, that's all I was told when I started coming out. All all the transgenders, all the LGBTQ, the gays, all they want to do is talk identity politics. And then it kind of got boring. It was a slow little wave. And then it came back with a fury. I was told at one point, this is the weird thing. Coming out is devastating. And you have to do all these things and reorient life. My parents eventually agreed with me. There was a time 5-6 years ago, something, where I was told that coming out actually gets me more social credibility. That it's almost like my parents would be excited. Whoa, what? You're trans? Wow, we could go tell everyone the news. And now we're in Vichy America, and it's kind of, the other way again. Oh, thank you, DeFreak. I think you're a beautiful person. It's lovely having you here. You know, I know that we sometimes disagree on theism and atheism, but I always like to think that this is a home for people just to talk about the subject. And a shout out to James W., my co-host. Had him on last night, but I think we're going to be going back in the saddle soon and criticizing fundamentalist religion. It's kind of what we do, and other superstitions. Bigfoot. I once hosted a debate on a Bigfoot channel. He was a nice guy, though. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Well, this has been Theist Helpline, a show where we ask theists what they believe and why. And the debate topics will go down into the title after the stream's done. It's been fun. Oh, I had so many notes. That was one of I strolled through the comments, and someone was like, "Why does Amy?" I think she was more interested in her little book than the debate. Yes, it is true. It was a notebook, not the notebook. That would have been a different story. But no, I just take decent notes, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I have ADHD, and I've learned that if I don't take notes, that it'll just go into oblivion. It will not go from short term to long term, and so you need to write everything down. So that's why I was looking at my little black book, looking for not a hot date, but just the next talking point. Which is what I did today. I do it for all the people. I have, the Leviticus, which that guy was everywhere. I know he insulted me at the end, but that was because I swear. I don't take it personally, because I've come to understand when they come out swinging for gender after we've spent like an hour and a half talking about why your God doesn't exist, it's a you problem, not a me problem. Yeah, well, slavery, I may be defending it, but at least I'm not a tranny. Yeah, but you're defending slavery. No one cares what your sexuality is. You are defending a book that says owning people as property is okay. But, we could talk about my junk. It was very nice of them. They defended me and muted him and didn't want to handle any of that nonsense. Sending love to all my panel hosts. I love Ix on there. I was talking over him sometimes, but he is just great. Just another one. Taco is fantastic, especially when you're talking to a presup. The confusion on their face as they're trying to absorb their own worldview sent back to them is always fun. And all the other people on there. We, I forget his name already, but we had a special guest host tonight. He seemed pretty knowledgeable. He was good. So sending love to everyone. Randolph, James W. Let's fly. See, this is what I mean. I need James W. He helps me fly the plane, land the plane. I guess both of those things. As well as all the lovely people in chat, our awesome mods who make this stream so great. And lovely viewers like you who make this channel even possible. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, or subscribe. I said it. You can let them go now. Then hit that bell icon to all so you can join our live streams or see our premieres. Or hey, why not leave a comment once the video's done? You could head to the Skeptic and Ranting Discord server, which I thoroughly need to update this summer. If not, fine. Not an admin for chat purposes, but for someone who wants to help out creating ranks and handling different types of Discord business, because I still love Titan. Send love to our head mod out there and all of our mods. Along with all of our fantastic channel members with our evolving badge system, along with all the fantastic perks at patreon.com/Amy Newman. I am Amy Newman, and myself and James W. will see you. Oh, I can't help it. Who is live right now? I'll send you off to someone. Oh, the best in the business. Talk Heathen is live right now. Head to them if you'd like. But We will see you all in the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z. Good night, everyone. Mwah!